Good afternoon, and welcome to the September 26th meeting of the Pinehurst Village Council. The first item on our agenda is our invocation, and we're delighted to have John Jacobs from the Village Chapel. If we will stand for the invocation, it will be followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. Welcome.
Let us pray. Almighty God, our Heavenly Father, grant to those who hold office in this village the spirit of wisdom, charity, and justice, that with steadfast purpose they may faithfully serve in their offices to promote the well-being of all people, and remembering that it's to God whom we must account for all our powers and privileges. Guide the people of Pinehurst in the election of officials and representatives, that by faithful administration and wise laws, the rights of all may be protected, and our village be enabled to fulfill your purposes. For yours is the kingdom, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen.
Let us say the Pledge of Allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much, Reverend Jacobs. You might stay for some exciting meeting, or you might have something better to do. Thank you, Reverend. We appreciate it. Next on our agenda, we have reports, first from our manager. Jeff?
I only have one thing to report on. I know all five of you are aware of the initiative to work with the Triangle JCOG and our partner communities of Aberdeen and Southern Pines on some cooperative planning efforts going forward, and I think some of the folks in the audience have heard that narrative before as well. We have started laying some initial groundwork for that effort at the manager level, and we will be in the future advancing that dialogue with elected officials across the three communities as well. But we got together a couple weeks ago, and we kind of decided upon a recommended framework for that endeavor, which would entail us coming together on an annual basis to create or revalidate a list of priority items that we want to work together on, and then gain the concurrence of our elected officials that are part of that process as well. To move forward on those things. And then for each one of those items, we would have potentially a separate individual framework or a timeline that we would bring together working groups of subject matter experts to try to come together and hash out appropriate solutions that our elected officials can then consider adopting as need be to the benefit of all three communities. And then the next step for us is we will be sitting down in another couple of weeks at the manager level to come together with put together a recommended initial starting point list to offer up to our elected officials, and then present that to those delegates from the three communities as a start point, and we'll move forward from that point on. So it's very early on in the process, but I want to let everybody know that we are starting that process, moving forward, and I think we all have very high hopes for what we might be able to accomplish in that endeavor.
Thank you, Jeff. Clark? John Baldry? No. Claire? John Cashin? I would just kind of add from Jeff's presentation that we have been working informally with our neighbors for a long time, and this kind of formalizes things because we should work together as the three largest municipalities in southern Moore County. So thank you for helping us with that, Jeff. Okay, next I'm going to make a presentation or a recognition of a young man named Tommy Morrison. Will you come up to the microphone, please? I hear you're an awesome golfer.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure to meet you.
Thank you.
This says, we don't know if we've ever had a resident of Pinehurst win, and I know you just recently moved here, but you've moved to a great place. You know that. But we wanted to recognize you, and I will just read, congratulations on your achievement, Thomas Griffin Morrison. The Pinehurst Village Council officially recognizes Tommy Morrison for his achievement in the U.S. Kids Golf World Championship, winning the boys' 12-year-old division, and as a member of the winning United States team in the World Van Horn Cup. That was also here, wasn't it? Yes. Yes. The years of practice, focus, and determination have earned him this honor, and we look forward to seeing where his golf game will take it. Who knows, 2024 U.S. Open here. So thank you for representing the village of Pinehurst well, and congratulations. We have a few little gifts for you. A presentation to kind of a familiar face, but we haven't seen him in a while, Jay Snyder. If you will come on up. Jay, we're pleased to see you. And these two gentlemen are standing in your honor. We hear you've been missing for a while.
I've been a little MIA, so to speak.
A little MIA. Okay, I'm not going to ask anything more, because I can be tortured. So, this is a resolution honoring the service of Mr. Jay Snyder to the Village of Pinehurst Planning and Zoning Board and Board of Adjustment. That whereas the Village Council of Pinehurst wishes to acknowledge and express its appreciation to Mr. Jay Snyder for his dedicated service to the citizens of Pinehurst as a member of the Board of Adjustment and Planning and Zoning Board. Whereas Mr. Snyder was first appointed to the Planning Board on February 22nd, 2011, and as a member of the Board of Adjustment on March 13th, 2012, and served continuously and faithfully from that time. And whereas Mr. Snyder served as a village resident representing the interests of citizens outside and inside the corporate limits, and whereas Mr. Snyder was instrumental in the efficient operation of the Planning and Zoning Board, always conducting the village's business in a courteous, professional manner, and whereas Mr. Snyder worked on multiple subcommittees. I liked it when we met at the hospital.
It was nice.
Yeah, we had this great room, and oh, wow. And study groups, and utilized his professional skills as a group facilitator, construction manager, and facilities planner to achieve a better outcome for the community. And whereas Mr. Snyder was involved in numerous reviews of significant development in Pinehurst and its extraterritorial jurisdiction, in which he always ensured that the Planning and Zoning Board fully examined all of the aspects of the proposed development and provided the best possible recommendation to the Village Council concerning each development or land use request. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the Village Council in its regular meeting in January that we hereby express on behalf of the citizens of Pinehurst deep appreciation and gratitude for the gifts of time, ability, and determination given as a member of the Board of Adjustment. And we thank you very, very much, Jay. You really have contributed a great deal. Say a few words. Say a few words.
Thank you very much. It was a memorable experience, those 6 or 7 years being on the Planning and Zoning Committee and the Board of Adjustments. For those that don't know, I just returned from a 7-month tour in Iraq with some of our finest Americans serving in the military overseas, and they were fantastic men and women. Similarly, I want to say that it's been a great pleasure working with all of the members of the Planning and Zoning Committee, the Board of Adjustments, and Village Council. I want to thank you for the opportunity to serve on these committees, for your trust, for your backing, and for your leeway where you allowed us to do the diligence we needed to do as a committee and as a Board of Adjustment. So thank you again very much for the opportunity. And when I see folks like Tom and Leo and Fred in the crowd, folks I served with on Planning and Zoning and Board of Adjustments, it just reminds me that Pinehurst is home, and I'm glad I'm here. Thank you very much.
I think part of that hug was for his service, and the other part was for his safe return. Thank you, Jay. Thank you, Fred. Okay, he's getting hugs for everyone. Next, we have a presentation by our manager.
Yeah, and I think many of you might have noticed that we have many of our esteemed firefighters here in the audience tonight, and they're here with us tonight because we have the privilege of presenting to them the Life Safety Achievement Award for 2016. This is an award that's handed out annually by the National Association of State Fire Marshals, and it really is an honor to present this to them. As I look back over my last couple of years, I think this is the third time I've had the honor of presenting this award to our fire department, and who knows how many years prior to that you all have earned that distinction as well. A little bit about the award. It is fairly prestigious, and you got to kind of get over a couple of high bars to be awarded this thing. The first is you have to have a documented and demonstrated education program that's aimed at preventing fire injuries and deaths in the community. And then beyond that, the community itself actually has to have the results. And the result that our community has almost year in and year out is we have 0 fire-related deaths in our community each year as this thing is looked at. And some of us might be inclined to say, well, that's not a particularly high bar to get over. Community like ours, we don't hear a lot about fires at all, really, much less fire-related deaths. But in reality, only about 160 fire departments across the United States earned this honor this year, and that's pretty reflective, I think, of what happens every year. So it truly is a high distinction. So I'd like to ask Carlton and all of our firefighters that are in the audience to come on up and so I can present this certificate to them.
Who's holding down the fort?
We're not far from it. They are.
Oh, yeah, you're right, you're right.
All right, so can we come on in here, Carlton? All right. Get a good picture of that? Yeah, all right. Okay. It's not framed or anything. I apologize for that. No, you get hung on the wall. All right. Congratulations. Okay, thank you, Jeff. And again, we can add our congratulations to our fire department. Carlton and Floyd and all of the crew do a wonderful job. So keep up the good work, and thank you very much. Okay, the next item is our consent agenda, and all these items can be approved under one motion unless a council member wants to discuss any one of them. Do I hear a motion?
I move to adopt all the items listed and consider routine on the consent agenda.
We have a motion by John Baldry and a second by John Cashin. Is there any discussion? If not, let's vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Thank you. That's unanimous. Next is number 8. Is that yours, Jeff? Oh, Dave
Dave's
White.
got this one. Okay, good.
Come on, Dave. Come on down.
How's everyone doing this afternoon?
We are doing fine.
That
And
is
who is this
great.
lovely lady you have with you?
Carrie O'Quinn, she represents the foundation with First Health.
Nice to have you, Carrie.
We're here today because the foundation, First Health, submitted a request for sponsorship for the upcoming event. This 1 in 8K, More for the Cure, scheduled for Saturday, October 7th. As part of the sponsorship request, they're asking for a waiver of fees to rent Tufts Park and use of our mobile stage. Should council agree to waive the rental fees for the park and provide the mobile stage, the Parks and Recreation staff will make those accommodations. And Carrie O'Quinn's here, like I mentioned, with the foundation. If you have any further questions about the event itself or any questions on the staff end, I'm happy to help.
Are you running in the event, Dave?
No.
Me either, me either. I
Get your
noticed,
T-shirts.
I noticed in your memo that our golf cart was requested, and we don't have one. I thought we had one during the US Open. Did we just rent it or something?
We rented several
Okay.
golf carts for
So we
different
don't
special
have a golf
events. Things like that.
That'll be okay. We
Probably
have
have.
a bicycle available. They'll use it to mark the course
Okay.
on Friday. That's what it
Okay.
was used for, so.
Okay. Any questions for Dave or for Carrie? This is one of our sponsorship requests, and it's a very worthy one. So is this, do we need a motion or just a consensus?
Consensus.
Okay. So is there any opposition to this? Okay, then it's the consensus of the council that we shall support this event by donating the items requested. Thank you very much for coming. Thanks, Dave.
Thank you.
Carrie. Okay. Good luck. Are you going to run? You'll be there. Okay. Okay. Number 9.
It's that time of year again. We've got all of our results from surveys that have rolled in, and we're lucky to have Jason Morato from the ETC Institute, who does our annual surveying, here to present their findings. And I think John Fry may be available as well if there's any other follow-on discussion that you have about the results.
Welcome.
All right, well, it is our, tonight we're going to combine and show you our business and our community survey results back to back. Jason has worked to adjust those so that they'll fit nicely in our schedule. We know you have a long agenda this evening. So once again, we've contracted with ETC Institute of Olathe, Kansas. You're familiar with their product. The survey was conducted from mid-July to mid-August this year, and the information gathered will assist the village in establishing budget priorities and policy direction, and refine that in the coming years. Jason is our project manager with ETC Institute, and I'm just going to turn it right over to him.
Great, thanks. Well, it's great to be here again in Pinehurst. This is the 6th year in a row that we've done a resident and business survey, and this is my 4th year coming here to present the results. So I always look forward to this trip every September or October. It's kind of become a fall tradition. So I'm here to present the results of the 2017 survey. Just one quick slide about ETC. We're based in Olathe, Kansas, which is a suburb of the Kansas City area, but we're a national leader in providing market research for local governments. In the last 10 years alone, we've done surveys in over 900 communities in 49 states, and that includes a lot of work throughout the state of North Carolina. This is actually my 8th trip to North Carolina just this year for various different projects. So this is really the type of work that we specialize in. So the purpose of the survey, and I'm sure you're probably familiar with this, to objectively assess what residents think about village services, also help determine what their priorities are. We're also able to measure trends from the previous surveys. Most of the questions have been the same year after year. And then also we're able to see how Pinehurst stacks up with residents in other communities on both a regional and a national basis. So this survey was 7 pages long. I mentioned it includes most of the same questions as previous years. Of course, this is the 6th year that we've done this survey. These surveys are administered by a combination of mail, online, and phone to randomly selected households throughout the village. And that's really our standard methodology for these types of surveys, is that mail, online, phone combination. And we received this year a total of 414 completed surveys. And one thing we always do when we administer our community surveys is, as we're collecting the data, we check the demographics of survey respondents to make sure it matches up with the actual demographics of the area. So we had a really good representation this time as well. And the results of the 414 surveys at the 95% level of confidence has a margin of error of plus or minus 4.8%. So essentially what that means is if you did the survey essentially the same way 100 times, 95 times the results would be plus or minus 4.8% from what we're reporting. So the results aren't perfect, but really it's a very, very small margin of error. So here you can see we have a map of the village. The red dots are households that completed a survey. So we had really a pretty good representation throughout the village. The breakout's very similar to what we've had on previous surveys. So here's the bottom line up front. This is really our main conclusions from the survey, and then after this, I'll go through some of the major findings to show how we came to these conclusions. So we found that once again, residents have a very, very positive perception of the village overall, and I've just listed here a couple of examples. 95% of residents rated Pinehurst as an excellent or a good place to live, and 94% say they would recommend Pinehurst to others as a place to live. On this year's survey, the satisfaction ratings are a little bit higher than what we saw last year. Really each year we've done this survey, the results have gotten just a little bit higher each time. So they're actually much higher now than they were going back to 2013, which is what we use as our baseline year. And the results were really, really good then, so it's impressive that they're so much higher now. And really these results are some of the very highest in the nation of all the places where we do these surveys. And we'll look at this in more detail in a little bit, but Pinehurst rated above the regional average in 48 out of 50 areas and above the U.S. average in 46 out of 50 areas. And you'll see in most cases the village is significantly above the averages for other communities. And then we found the top overall priorities for improvement are level of public involvement in local decisions, street and right-of-way maintenance, and then efforts at maintaining the quality of neighborhoods. So first, we'll just look at some general perceptions residents have of the village. So here we ask people to rate their perception of the village in a number of different ways. And you can see this question is asked on a 5-point scale, with the dark blue being excellent, the lighter blue is good, the white is neutral, or in this case, that kind of means average. It's a rating of a 3 on a 5-point scale. And then the rating of 1 or 2, below average or poor, is the pink. So throughout the report, we really kind of follow the same format where the blue are the positive ratings, the pink are the negative. And what really stands out here is that overall the positive ratings by far outweigh the negative. In fact, in most of these areas, you have just a handful of respondents who gave a rating of below average or poor. And if you look at the top, feeling of safety, maintenance of the village is a place to live, overall image of the village, quality of life in the village is a place to retire. For each of these, over 90% of residents gave a rating of excellent or good. And this was the very first question on the survey. Here we asked residents to rate their satisfaction with major categories of city services. And then later on in the survey, we asked them to rate some more specific areas within these categories. So this is really more at the departmental level. And again, you can see the positive ratings far outweigh the negative. If you look at those top 4, fire, police, solid waste, customer service, for each of those, over 80% of residents are satisfied, less than 5% are dissatisfied. So this is a question we've asked every year in the survey. Would you recommend Pinehurst to others as a place to live? You can see this year 94% of residents said yes. And this number has been very, very consistent over the years, every year between 93 and 97%. And then this question is one you can see we've also asked every year. We ask residents how satisfied they are with the value they receive for the property taxes that funds the village's operating budget. So if you look at that bottom line, 2017, this year 73% of residents were either very satisfied or satisfied, which is the highest that it's been for any of these 5 years. And only 6% are dissatisfied, which is the lowest that it's been. So you've got more than a 12-to-1 ratio of people who are satisfied versus dissatisfied with the portion of property taxes used for the operating budget. So now we'll take a look at how the results have changed over the last few years. So the blue line are residents for this year's survey who are either very satisfied or satisfied with each area. The yellow are the results for last year's survey. So comparing the yellow and the blue lines are really the one-year trend. And then the orange are the results for the baseline year of 2013. So that's the way to take a quick look at kind of the long-term trends. So this comparison is for perceptions of the village. There really haven't been any significant changes since last year's survey. And you'll see as we go through this, I put a blue arrow by areas that have had an increase of at least 5% from last year. Red arrow means it's down by at least 5%. So these ratings have been very consistent in all of these areas. For major categories of city services, most of these areas there hasn't been much of a change, but there are a couple areas that have gone down a little bit from last year's survey. Street and right-of-way maintenance is down 6% from last year, also down 6% from 2013. And then level of public involvement is down 5% from last year's survey. But the good thing is it's still 11% higher than it was in 2013. So there's been a little bit of a short-term dip there, but long-term still much, much higher than it used to be. Here are comparisons for public safety. Not a lot of significant changes from last year, but there was a 5% increase in fire prevention and education programs. The other item I wanted to point out here is enforcement of local traffic laws, which is that fourth row down. It's up 2% from last year, but up 7% from 2013. So kind of a steady increase, a good long-term increase there. Now for cultural and recreation services, this is the second year in a row that all 13 items have increased in satisfaction from the previous year. So really there's been an unbelievable increase, both short-term and long-term in this area. And I put arrows here by the 5 areas that have had a significant increase since last year. Number of village parks, quality of outdoor athletic fields, village-sponsored cultural arts events, availability of outdoor athletic fields and facilities, and then range of amenities at park and recreation facilities. That one's up 10% from last year, up almost 20% going back to 2013. It really, just about every one of these areas is really up significantly going back to 2013. Now for solid waste, each one of these is up 1 or 2% from last year's survey. And this is the first time I believe that there's at least a 90% satisfaction rating for all 3 of these areas. For public services, not a lot of significant changes overall, but there are 3 areas that really stand out. Condition of existing sidewalks is up 10% from last year, up more than 20% going back to 2013. Stormwater runoff is up 8% from last year, up 14% going back to 2013. And then sidewalks and pedestrian facilities is up short term and then also up significantly long term as well. And for public communication, 2 significant increases in this area from last year. The website is up 5%, and then monthly village e-news updates is up significantly also. And then customer service. This is based on people who have actually contacted the village in the past year, and every one of these is up between 1 and 3% from last year. So not a significant change, but still an increase in all these areas. And really, these are unbelievably high numbers, more than a 90% satisfaction in 3 out of these 5 areas. So now we'll kind of move on to benchmarking comparisons to see how Pinehurst compares to other communities. And just like previous years, the village really is one of the very highest rated communities where we do these surveys. So these comparisons here are for major categories of city services. Just about every area, Pinehurst is significantly above both the regional and the national average. So the blue are the ratings for Pinehurst, red are the average ratings for the Atlantic region, which includes North Carolina and some surrounding states, and then yellow are the ratings from residents from all across the U.S. So the one area that stands out the most here is that 4th row down, customer service from village employees. So Pinehurst has an 83% satisfaction rating. The regional average is only 45%, national average 47%. So Pinehurst residents are much, much happier with customer service here than they are in most other communities. Here are comparisons for perceptions of the village. All of these are significantly above. Now, used to the village as a place to raise children was pretty much right on par with other communities. So now it's actually significantly above other communities as well. And these other areas for years have been much, much higher than we see in other places across the country. For public safety, here there's 4 areas that are significantly above the regional and national average. The one that especially stands out here is village efforts to prevent crimes. Pinehurst has a 92% satisfaction rating. Both the regional and national average are just a little below 60%. And for code enforcement, all 3 of these are at least 10% above both the regional and national average. For For parks and recreation, this is an area that's seen real significant increases over the last couple of years. You see for this chart, there would be a couple areas that were significantly above benchmarking averages, but most of them were pretty much right on par. And now this year, 5 out of the 7 areas are significantly above both the regional and the national average. And then for maintenance, most of these are also significantly above. The one of them that especially stands out here is that 4th row down, maintenance of main village street thoroughfares, 89% satisfaction rating for the village. You can see the regional average is only 48%, national average 50%, and the 3 items rated right above that are also far, far above the rating for other communities. And then for communication, all 5 of these areas are also significantly above other communities, especially that top row, quality of information about programs and services. So now we'll kind of move on to priorities for investment. You might remember this from previous years. This is our important satisfaction rating. And this analysis is based on 2 questions on the survey. First, we asked residents how satisfied they are with services, which is the type of question we've been looking at so far. And then the follow-up question to that is, which of these services are the most important for the village to emphasize? So these are prioritized with the idea that the items that have a combination of a low satisfaction rating, but also ones that people think are the most important, should be the top priorities. So this is for major categories of village services. There's 3 items that kind of stand out as the highest priorities. Level of public involvement in local decisions is first, followed by street and right-of-way maintenance, and then efforts at maintaining quality neighborhoods. Enforcement of village codes and ordinances ranks 4th, and it's actually very close to those top 3, so it almost fell into that top category. And those were the top 4 last year as well, but the order was just a little bit different. And then here's the same type of analysis for public services. Here there's 3 items that stand out as the highest priorities: adequacy of street lighting, availability of sidewalks, and then maintenance of neighborhood streets. And then just some other various survey findings. This is the first year that we asked this question on the survey. We asked residents if they shop regularly in the village center. 30% said yes. And of the 70% who said no, we then had a follow-up question and asked, what are the reasons that prevent you from shopping regularly downtown? And you can see there's 2 items that really stand out. Merchandise is more targeted towards tourists, and then the variety of merchandise offered. Now, this is the question we asked for the first time last year, and we asked it again this year. We asked residents what they think about the amount of effort the village applies to enforcing codes and ordinances. So if you look at the bottom left-hand corner, 2016, 29% said it was about right. And then you had a pretty significant portion who said it's either too much or too little. Now this year, 61% say the level of code enforcement is just about right. So more than double what we saw last year. You still have 20% who say it's too little, and now you've only got 6% who say it's too much. And then this is the question we've asked each year. We ask people how they get information about the village. The order of these is the same as it's pretty much always been. Well, there have been a couple of notable changes. One is that 2nd row down, the village newsletter. It's down a little bit from last year's survey. But then if you go down the list a little bit, the monthly village e-news is up quite a bit from last year. So maybe kind of a shift there. And then we also asked residents which capital improvements they think are the most important. The top 3 are really kind of all related to streets. Additional street resurfacing is first, followed very closely by additional street lighting, and then additional sidewalk construction in neighborhoods. And then this year, bicycle lanes and paths is 4th, and really rated right below those top 3. So then just a quick recap. We saw that residents have a very, very positive perception of the village. There's a lot of examples of that. Also, we saw this year the ratings have increased a little bit from last year. They're up significantly from the baseline year of 2013. And then once again, the village really rates as one of the highest performing communities in the country, far above the regional and national average in most of those areas that we looked at. And the top overall priorities are level of public involvement in local decisions, street and right-of-way maintenance, and then efforts at maintaining quality of neighborhoods. So that's all I had for the resident survey. Does anyone have any questions or comments?
Do you have any questions for Jason?
And see, are you going to work on the business survey next?
Business one's next, yep.
I guess my questions are, in looking through the survey, I think public involvement in local decisions always sticks out for me as something that we should do. So maybe an opinion. I know you did a survey, and you get a lot of dots on surveys that come back, and you can statistically come to conclusion. But what we've recently done, which I think is for Madam Mayor, I think is a good way ahead to I think improve our rating for public involvement, is what we did with our planning effort, and that was for land use planning, where we had a citizen group, staff group, village council group facilitated. I think for us that is a good model for us to continue to use, to work toward citizen engagement, community engagement. I think more so, or as another tool beside Open Village Hall and other electronic means that we can. I think it's always good whenever we can hear firsthand from residents and citizens, because it gives us a chance to enter into a dialogue as opposed to answering a numerical question, if you will. I think we get more knowledge and we get more information from those sorts of things. So I think what we've done, Madam Mayor, is I think we are working toward a way to improve, not so much the rating, but to improve for our village citizen involvement and community engagement. Is there an opinion you may have on that, from what your past history over four years in helping us is with respect to what I'm saying?
As far as whether or not that would help, is that?
Sure. Or compared to other communities that you may be doing a survey for?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, those things would all absolutely help. And this year the ratings are down a little bit, but really long-term it's much, much better than it's been still, even with a little bit of a dip this year. So all those things you mentioned definitely would help boost that number. And really it still compares very favorably to other communities, even though it's down a little bit this year.
What really stands out to me is the issue of streetlights. 20 years ago, you couldn't find a handful of people who wanted streetlights. They would say, we won't be able to see the night sky. And because of the change in our demographics, we now have a lot more demand for streetlights, more demand for sidewalks, again, because the demographics has changed. And we're struggling with that because there are still a good number of people who do not want streetlights and do not want sidewalks. So that's a struggle for the village council.
Yeah, and the street lighting, it's the ratings this year were down just a little bit from last year, but that's another area that's had a big increase in satisfaction long term. When I first started coming out here, that was one of the very few areas that had a red arrow for the benchmarking being below other communities, but now it's pretty much right on par with what we see in other communities.
This year, again, we'll be getting the data set so that we can segment it by neighborhood again. Again, these are the high-level results, but we're able to break this down, neighborhood by neighborhood. There's also the maps this year. They've been there every year. This year, we're seeing more variance in the colors, so you can see each question by area of the village. So you might find that interesting. While we're between reports here, I will say that both full reports and both of Jason's presentations will be on the web today for citizens to review.
Okay, that's great.
I think I'm also interested in the comment you made that came in the survey with respect to quality of new development. Development is something that's ongoing here, and maybe that's something we should, maybe something that we as a council, with the staff together, should be looking at to see how we would tackle it. I think that's an interesting finding as it deals with the challenges we have today, and then moving forward in the future.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? Okay, we can move on to the business survey.
Okay, so now to the business survey. Looks like here it is. So we've done the business survey every year as well as the resident one, but this is the first year we've actually presented the results at the council meeting. so we won't give you the ETC spiel again. So I'll just go through the purpose and methodology of the survey. You can see here some of the topics I've kind of broken the results into. Then I'll do a quick summary and be happy to answer any questions as well. So the purpose of this survey, similar to the resident one, is to determine how satisfied businesses are with village services, and also identify ways to improve the services that are provided to businesses. And then also with this survey, we're also able to measure trends from previous surveys. So this survey is shorter than the resident survey, which is typically how we do this, since businesses are a little less likely than residents to fill out a survey. So it's a 4-page survey. It's also administered by a combination of mail, online, and phone, just like the resident survey. And the results are based on a random sample of 86 business owners and senior managers who completed the survey. And our goal is to get at least 75 completed surveys, so we were able to exceed that. So first, let's look at some general characteristics of businesses that filled out the survey. We had a pretty good mix of businesses who have been in business for a long time, as well as some newer ones. 44% have been in business in the village for more than 20 years. Then you have 14% in 5 years or less. Here, this shows the type of business that filled out the survey. Really had a big mix of all different types, and this breakout's similar to what we've had on previous surveys. And then this is a new question we asked this year. So you can see 33% of businesses are members of the Moore County Chamber of Commerce. About a fourth of them are located in the Village Center. And then 20% are members of the Pinehurst Business Partners. So now we'll take a look at some perceptions businesses have of the village. So this is a similar question we asked to the resident survey. We asked businesses to rate their perception of the village on the same 5-point scale. And you can see the ratings are overwhelmingly positive for all 3 areas. Over 90% of businesses are either very satisfied or satisfied with the overall feeling of safety, overall quality of life, overall image of the village. This is a question you can see we've asked every year. We asked if people would recommend the village as a business location. And you can see on this year's survey, 71% of businesses said they would be either very likely or likely to recommend the village as a business location. It's the first time that number has reached the 70% level, and we have only 5% who said they would be not likely or not at all likely to recommend the village as a business location. So the ratings have been very good every year, but this is actually the best it's been in this area. We also asked about the overall business atmosphere, how it ranks today compared to 2 years ago. So 34% of businesses say it's better now than it was 2 years ago, compared to only 2% who say it's worse. And then you've got 42% who say there's been no change over the past couple of years, but it still rates as good. So now kind of moving on to satisfaction with village services. So here we ask businesses to rate how satisfied they are with Pinehurst services and departments. And this is based on businesses who have actually used these departments or interacted with them in the past year. So again, this is asked on that same 5-point scale. Results are overwhelmingly positive again. Really very few businesses who are dissatisfied. In fact, if you look at those top 5, there's no dissatisfied businesses. And the top 2, fire and police emergency, all businesses are either very satisfied or satisfied. And then this is the follow-up question to that. So here we ask businesses from that list, which are the most important to your business? And you can see there's 3 areas that really stand out: fire emergency response, police emergency response, and police patrol. And the good thing is that the satisfaction rating is very, very high for all 3 of these areas. So that's always good when you're matching up the most important items with ones that where businesses are very, very satisfied with. And then here we ask about the overall quality of services provided to businesses. So this is kind of taking into account everything that the village provides. And you can see here that 46% of businesses feel that the overall quality of services is either higher or significantly higher than they expect. Only 3% say it's lower, and then about half, 49%, say it meets expectations. Then here we ask businesses to rate satisfaction with various other services provided by the village. Again, you can see the satisfaction ratings are very, very high, especially for the cleanliness of village streets, landscape maintenance, condition of sidewalks. The ratings are a little bit lower for supporting business growth and the availability of parking. But even for those, you have more than 60% of businesses who are satisfied compared to less than 20% who are dissatisfied. And then here we ask businesses to rate their most recent contact with village staff. And again, these ratings are very, very positive as well. If you start at the top, you can see that 63% of businesses strongly agree that village staff was courteous. Another 21% agree that they were courteous. Businesses also feel that village staff was competent and professional, responsive to needs, and that issues were resolved promptly. So very high ratings in all 4 areas of customer service. Then we also asked a question about community development. Very high ratings for the historic district guidelines and zoning ordinances. The satisfaction is quite a bit lower for business science regulations, but the dissatisfied ratings aren't high either. There's really here a lot more people who gave a rating of a 3 on that 5-point scale, so kind of average. So then we also asked businesses, what are the reasons why they decided to locate in Pinehurst? So you see here the dark blue, that means it's an extremely important reason. The lighter blue is very important. The kind of white is important. So you can see the most important reasons are safety and security, the overall quality of the village, and then also quality health care. For each of those 3, over 55% of businesses rated that as being an extremely important reason for deciding to locate in the village. And then we had a whole section on the survey related to communication. We asked businesses how satisfied they are with the job the village does communicating with business owners. And you can see here that 63% of businesses are either very satisfied or satisfied. And that's compared to only 8% who are dissatisfied. So you've got more than almost an 8-to-1 ratio of businesses who are satisfied versus dissatisfied with the overall job the village does communicating with their business. And then there also were a couple questions specifically about the village website. This one I thought was interesting. Here we asked businesses to rate a couple different characteristics of the website, the availability of information, and then also how easy it is to navigate. And you can see the satisfaction ratings have increased for 5 consecutive years, each year just getting a little bit higher than the year before. Then we also asked overall, how satisfied are you with the village's website? So this year, 83% were either very satisfied or satisfied. No businesses at all were dissatisfied, so the rest gave that rating of a 3 on a 5-point scale. And you can see the ratings have been very, very good every year, but this is definitely the best that they've been. Then we asked, what are the best ways for the village to communicate important information to your business? The top 2 ways that kind of stand out are email and direct mail. Social media ranks 4th at 22%, but that's much, much higher than it was even as recently as just a couple of years ago where it was less than 10%. And then here we ask businesses how they feel about the impact of these different events in the village center. So for all of these events, just under 50% feel like it has a positive impact on their business. About 50% or a little bit more feel like it has no impact, and there's really very, very few businesses who think any of these things have a negative impact. So then just kind of a quick summary, the business survey results. The village definitely has a very, very strong brand with businesses. In all those areas of perception, the village rated very, very high. Definitely businesses have a very high level of satisfaction with village services, especially police and fire really stood out. Most businesses are also satisfied with the level of customer service they get from the village, especially with those who have actually interacted with village staff. And then also very high levels of satisfaction with how well the village communicates with their business. We also saw that the services that businesses rated as the most important are fire emergency response, police emergency response, and police patrol. And then the most important reasons why businesses located in Pinehurst are safety and security, quality of life, and then quality health care. So anyone have any questions or comments?
Okay, any questions or comments for Jason?
All I can say is, well, son of a gun. Based on the last few weeks, I would never have thought we were going to look so good. Thank you.
Right, yeah.
Just, for me, just a comment. I think I really agree. I'm looking at your executive summary, and certainly reasons influencing decisions to locate businesses in the village. Certainly safety and security is important. I think overall quality of life that you show, and quality of health care. I think for us as a council, I was intrigued by another one of your summary comments in the executive summary. Likelihood of recommending the village as a business location. 71% of businesses would be very likely or likely to recommend the village as a business location for family and friends. 24% would be somewhat likely to recommend the village as a business location to family and friends. Only 4% would not be likely. So there's 28% that have some sort of within the business community, I think, that you surveyed. Do you have a comment on that?
As far as, I guess, what was the question? Just as far as
Do you have a comment on 28% are saying not likely or would not recommend the village as a place? Other businesses were saying that they would not recommend the village of Pinehurst or be unlikely.
I thought it was, is it somewhat likely, the 28, somewhat likely or not likely, the 28%?
24% would be somewhat likely to
Right.
recommend the village as a business location. Only 4% would be not likely. I would like to have seen those numbers be smaller in
Right.
that, because what we're dealing is we're looking at a retail business in the village, which I think is important.
I think
Yeah.
it's our responsibility, or our actions would help to make those numbers smaller.
I agree.
And we have to work with the business community to find out what it is they want from us.
I agree. So I think what you've done is you've kind of highlighted something for us, which has kind of caught my attention.
Well, and also, parking, when they indicate, who was it that indicated, was it businesses indicated that parking was a problem or an issue?
That was on the resident survey.
Resident survey,
Right,
okay,
right.
okay.
Yeah. And for the businesses, you only had 4% who would not recommend. I mean, 24% somewhat, which is a 3 on a 5-point scale. So that's not as positive as the 71% I mentioned during the presentation. But still, you only had a few businesses who gave a rating of less than a 3 on a 5-point scale. But definitely, those are people who could easily be influenced, and on the next survey, either sway one way or the other.
I think it was why people are not shopping in the village, and it was because of the inadequacy of parking.
Right.
And ironically, the businesses will tell us that another business person is parking in front of their
Right.
business.
The survey results did not say that it was because of parking.
So one of the reasons that people don't shop,
It was one of the options for them to
Oh, it was?
choose from.
but some of them
It was,
chose
and
it.
it was, I think, the lowest of the 5.
Yeah, it was the lowest.
Right.
Yeah.
But it
Right.
was, so it was an option to choose, okay.
Right.
And I know you wanted to get 75, a minimum of 75 responses, and it looks like you got 86.
Right, right.
Was that across the entire village of Pinehurst and not restricted to the historic part of the village of Pinehurst?
That was across the entire village,
Thank you.
right? Yep, yep.
Okay, any other questions for Jason or any other comments? Okay, thank you very much. This is the first time I've seen the business survey.
Right.
We had the resident survey in our packet, but, so it bears additional study for all of us. So thank you very much for being here and for presenting the results. This is a tool that we use in our strategic planning every year. So this is kind of the kickoff for what are we going to do next year, and John is shaking his head.
Information.
Thank you
Great.
both very
We're-
much.
Great, thank you.
Okay, thank
Thanks.
Okay, I think Jeff, you're next.
Number 10, Natalie's going to come up, and for those of you that have paid attention for the last several years, you know that this is the time of the year that we also do a review of our performance for the previous year. A little bit of a different spin on it this year. We're calling it our State of the Village, and I hope you all appreciate the different way that we've laid this out.
I like it. I like it a lot. Thank you, Natalie.
Thank you for your patience as I hobble along once again. You may notice that I do not have my brace on today.
That
So-
indicates you must be getting better.
I am making progress and very pleased to be able to say that. So as I just passed around is this year's State of the Village report. We've previously referred to these as the annual performance report. And what I did for you this year is I tried to consolidate everything related to each community goal onto one page in a nice, easy to read and understandable format for the public, and try not to overwhelm you with charts and graphs. You just saw plenty of charts and graphs, and I tried to, like I said, put it in a way that was easy to understand and really highlighted the significant accomplishments of the village over the course of the last year. So what you have is the full document, and what I'm going to do today is actually go through it in a much, much more consolidated manner. But I would like to encourage you and the public to view these documents. They're on our village website. You can access them under the news item, and they're also stored and housed under the performance report page in the government section on the website. So I'd like to encourage folks to go through there and take a look at all the great detail, because there's a lot more detail in the report than I'm going to be able to cover here tonight, okay? So what am I going to cover tonight? Essentially, as in past years, I'm going to go over with you the results for 2017 relative to the balanced scorecard goals that we set. Now, as you know, a lot of the goals that we set on our scorecard are community survey goals, and you just heard Jason kind of go through those. So I'm going to really try to focus on not only the results, which you just heard, but really some of the significant accomplishments and initiatives, the things that we did to make the quality of life better for our residents and businesses this year. Okay? So with that said, I would like to thank you, the council, for your leadership and direction as you strive, of course, to do what you think is in the best interest of this community and making sure that our residents and businesses are happy. So the first page here, we have really a message, and this is from myself, Jeff Sanborn, the village manager, as well as Jeff Batten, the assistant village manager. So all three departments report up to all of the operating departments of the village report up to the three of us, and the three of us really do manage the day-to-day operations of the organization, kind of on a tag team basis, if you will. So this is from all of us, and really what we want to express here is similar to what Jason expressed, is that overall we were very successful in accomplishing the goals and objectives that you, the council, set out for us last year for 2017. You can see here that 99% of our residents and businesses have actually rated the overall quality of life in the village as good or excellent. Now, I want to say that for the purposes of our balanced scorecard, those neutrals that Jason referred to, we group was satisfied, so that we can specifically identify the dissatisfaction levels, okay? So that means only 1% of businesses and 1% of residents did not think that we had a good or excellent quality of life in the village of Pinehurst this year, which is absolutely phenomenal. We think that the results that Jason just showed you and all the improvements that have been made really since 2013 have a little bit of something to do with the fact that that's when we adopted the Baldrige Performance Excellence Framework. And that is really when the village began our continuous improvement efforts. And this year you can really see the progress that we've made as a result of that. So we have several different initiatives throughout the year. We accomplished 15 of those initiatives. Some of the survey results there that Jason mentioned earlier are in there as well, and I will, for the sake of time, not go through all of those again. But what I do want to say is what you're getting ready to see are what we call scores for each of the 9 major community goals that we have. And just like keeping score in a ball game, we keep score on how we're doing safeguarding the community or ensuring that our businesses are successful. So We are still using the red, yellow, green dial indicators to try to make it easy to identify whether or not we have accomplished the goals overall that we set for ourselves. While we may fall a little short in some, we may far exceed in others, and so it really is a composite, if you will. Okay? So with that, here you go. I want to just show you the progress that we've made since 13. It's small because we have a lot of highly satisfied folks, but again, you can see the move from 13 to 17. Jason mentioned that we have achieved the highest national annual satisfaction rating in the U.S. in a couple of different categories this year, and this year we did that in 5 areas. I think it's very important that we point out that that's not a one-time thing for us. This is something that we do each and every year, and as you can see, for the last 2 years, we have had the national highest satisfaction rating in 5 different areas. And I want to highlight the ones this year. We had 95%, again, this is including the neutrals, with overall satisfaction with the image of the village. 92% for our efforts to prevent crime due to the efforts of our police department. And then we have 94% with curbside recycling services, and we had 90% satisfaction with yard waste services. And this is the first year that Parks and Recreation has made the list, okay? So, and that is for number of parks in your community. And as you recall, Jason talked a lot about the improvements in the recreation area. We believe that has a lot to do with the investment that we've made into our park system over the last couple of years. So I really want to take a minute to just congratulate our police department and our police officers, as well as Walt and his team in public services. Our solid waste folks have received the national high rating in recycling, trash collection, and yard waste. And you'll be interested to know that the yard waste collection national ratings were made after we did our birdie and implemented one and done. So I'm very, very proud of our efforts there. All right, so we're going to go through each of those community goals. Basically, when we look at the scores, the goal, if we achieve our goal, our software assigns a score of 6.67. So anything above 6.67 is exceeding goal, okay? This year, we exceeded our goals overall, okay? We set red flag thresholds to say, as long as we're between the red flag and the goal, that's an acceptable level of performance. If it falls below the red flag threshold, then that's what we've said is our indicator that we really need to take a look at that specific area, okay? So overall, we exceeded our goals. I'm very, very proud of our staff. And here are our goals. You, council, I think, are fairly familiar with these, but they are safeguarding the community, making sure we have a premier residential community, thriving business community. We want to make sure we have multimodal transportation systems. We're managing solid waste, maintaining an active, healthy community. And from an internal perspective, we want to make sure we're professionally managing a high-performing organization and that we attract and retain an engaged workforce. And of course, maintain a healthy financial condition. So those are our 9 key goals, and I'm going to go through each one of those one at a time. Before I do that, I want to point out that we had several initiatives this year in order to try to achieve the results that I'm getting ready to share with you. In the detail report that I gave you, the second to last 2 pages include all of our initiatives that we plan to do this year. We were able to complete 14 initiatives. We had 3 in progress at year end that were planned, and there were a handful that we were not able to complete. And the reasons for that are listed in here, and several of those have been completed already since year end. They just didn't get finished by June. For example, the sidewalks construction project ran into July. So I just wanted to point that out for your information. You can go there and look at that, okay? You will see there's a noticeable improvement from 14 to 17. I've put a green arrow. There are no red arrows in this report, so that's why you don't see a decline. All right, so safeguarding the community. We had 4 goals on the scorecard for safeguarding the community. You've already heard the survey results today. Again, the things I want to point out here is our crime rate is well below national and state averages per 1,000 residents. We have 100% overall feeling of safety, 100% of response times, and then, of course, enforcement with traffic laws, lots of satisfaction. The things that I want to point out tonight, so tonight we recognize the Fire Department for the Life Safety Achievement Award. Also this year, the Fire Department was accredited, joining a really elite group of agencies, one of only 20 in North Carolina and 220 in the world. Okay, so one of 220 in the world to be accredited, one of, I think, Jeff, you said 160 to receive that award. So the accomplishments of our fire department are enormous. And this effort that has been led by our fire chief, Carlton Cole, has really helped improve our reaction times to those emergency calls. So when we've got a resident who needs help, our firefighters are there 28% faster today than they were in 2013. So I wanted to take a minute and congratulate, I think Carlton's in the audience, I wanted to congratulate Carlton for the great job he and his department have done.
Thank you, Carlton.
Along the same lines, in the police department, we continue to receive recognition from the outside for the great job that our officers are doing to make sure Pinehurst is a safe community. This year, we did receive the Traffic Safety Community of the Year Award again for 10 years in a row, named one of the safest communities for 4 consecutive years. And the fire department really worked hard this year to focus on a reorganization. You may recall we did a Birdie on police staffing. Councilmember Cashin participated in that. And we reorganized that department and created a captain position, a dedicated investigator, and made some on-call transitions. That has turned out to be very effective for the department in terms of managing their time, and they're having more time to be able to be proactive in their police patrol. So I wanted to take a minute to recognize Police Chief Earl Phipps, and I think he's got Ricky and Dee in the audience with him as well. So congratulations to our police and fire departments for a great job there. All right, our next community goal is ensure Pinehurst is a premier residential community. You can see up there in the top right-hand corner, we were right at the goal that we set for ourselves here. And in this area, we really tended to focus this year on making sure that we were trying to improve the quality of neighborhoods. So overall, that was the goal. And there was a lot of effort put on code enforcement this year. And many of you may know this year we implemented the MyVOP complaint management system. Since we did that, we had 1,200 complaints logged into our system this year that Angel Smith, our one code enforcement officer, investigated. She investigated 95% of those, got them resolved within 45 days, and then 93% of those, she was out there on site within 2 days. So we have an internal standard where when she gets a complaint, we're trying to get her out there at least within 2 days to do an investigation. All of this, I think, was interesting to see the changes that we made here and maybe how those could have potentially impacted the results that Jason shared with you earlier in terms of the amount of code enforcement that we're providing. Is it too much, too little, or just right? It seemed like we moved the needle a little more in the better direction with these changes. All right. So overall appearance is also impacted significantly by the efforts of our public services staff who mow over 200 miles of right-of-ways and maintain those. So I wanted to take a minute to recognize Walt Morgan and the public services staff who really do a great job, along with our beautification committee, who's working to make sure that all of the public areas and spaces are gorgeous. So I wanted to say thank you, Walt. In addition, of course, our obviously planning department, Angel Smith, and I think we have Steve here in the audience as well representing our planning department. And of course, Mark Wagner overseeing buildings and grounds also helps make sure that we can achieve these kinds of results. So what you have up here is overall pretty good satisfaction ratings. And satisfaction with codes and enforcements has remained pretty consistent. You can see it's in the red because we really tried to move it up. That rating has been around that 84-85%, and as Jason said, it's really above the national. It's not a bad rating, so this is something we want to take a look at. All right. In terms of the business community, this is really something that myself and the other two village managers oversee. And you'll have to excuse me. Do you have any water? Excuse me. And what we've done here this year is the streetscape improvements on McCaskill Road, including the brick sidewalks, the organized parking, the street lighting, the enhanced signage, all of those things are going to be completed next year, but we started doing those this year. What I think is incredible on this page is the increase in the occupancy rate in the village center. It has moved from 80% to 95% since 2014. All right, the next goal, we were overall in the yellow here on this one because we fell a little short of our goal in terms of satisfaction with street and right-of-way maintenance. But this year, as you know, we did nearly complete all of the sidewalks in Village Acres, and we also extended our Greenway Trail system along 15501 to Spring Lake Drive. Some of the other things we did here is as it relates to transportation, is collaborated on the Midland Road Corridor study. In addition, while it's not listed here, our public services staff oversaw the repaving of over 3 miles of the 106 miles of village streets this year, with a total dollar investment exceeding $800,000 in street maintenance. So I want to congratulate Mark Wagner for his oversight of the sidewalks and the greenways, as well as Walt Morgan for overseeing our street resurfacing. Solid waste, we've already talked a little bit about this. We have a focus here on recycling. I think Walt and his team do a great job with that. And we continue to be ranked in the top 5% in North Carolina in terms of the amount of refuse that we divert from the landfill. So we're really, really proud of that accomplishment. And then again this year, you may recall, we had Hurricane Matthew. And our public works staff worked tirelessly to make sure that we were getting that stuff off the road. And they actually cleared over 154 tons of yard debris as a result of that storm. So that was a huge accomplishment for them to be able to do that and continue to provide services that they provided and get the great satisfaction ratings that we saw this year. So really, really proud of our solid waste folks. In terms of parks and recreation, we're all green here. It's all good news in Parks and Rec as it relates to outdoor athletic facilities and parks. Done really, really well in those areas. And as I mentioned, the splash pad, the shelter that we constructed this year over there, the tennis courts in recent years, I think all of those things are really starting to be used by the community, and that's reflective in our satisfaction ratings. Mark Wagner, as you know, oversees this department. He's not here, so I'm going to take a minute to recognize Dave and Nicole, who I think are sitting in the audience, and thank them for their efforts. Dave and Nicole are our program directors, and they're the ones that make it all happen. So I want to say thanks to them. Internal focus. This is our goal to professionally manage a high-performing organization. You see the picture down there in the bottom. You may recall Jason mentioning e-news announcements. So one of the improvements that we've made this year to try to better inform the public of what topics you will be discussing in your council meetings is prior to your meeting, we send out a village e-news that doesn't just say the agenda's posted, but we actually tell the residents what's on the agenda. So if they are interested, they can easily click get online and see all the documentation and supporting materials in advance. So that was one improvement that we made this year that we're very proud of. We have made several improvements as it relates to this goal. And we did well in communications. We've talked about level of involvement in public in decisions earlier. And obviously, you can see the huge increase there in terms of satisfaction with the value of their tax dollars. But some of the key improvements that I wanted to point out, and all of these were really feedback that we received from participating in the North Carolina Awards for Excellence program. But we really focused on communications using technology. For example, this e-news, we now post the planning and zoning, historic preservation, BOA boards, agenda minutes, all that information is now online and transparent, it wasn't this time last year. We implemented the MyVOP service request system to make sure that we could manage complaints, and Councilmember Bergren served on that team. And that has been, I think Jason, our IT director, would say has been one of the best softwares we have acquired village-wide. It just works so well. And we began routinely surveying Parks and Recreation program participants to find out, after they participate in our Tai Chi class or our painting class or in our day camp, do they like the services? Were they satisfied with the services that they received from the village? We just started doing that in January. Carlton worked really hard to enhance some of our emergency preparedness, readiness here in the village, and that was another significant improvement that we've made here. I would like to take a second here to recognize Jason Whitaker, our IT director, our CIO, I should say. Jason is always looking for ways to use technology to help us improve, and we've used technology for just about every single one of these implementations, process improvements that we made this year. So thank you, Jason, for your service. Workforce focus, we had great results in our workforce survey this year. 97% of our employees agreed they liked their job. 100% of our volunteers were satisfied with the volunteer experience. And then we had an engagement index of 8.96, which is a composite of multiple survey questions, so it's 89% satisfaction. This year we revamped our internal training program for staff and implemented an internal training requirement. Angie spearheaded a team for that, our HR director, and she also revamped our performance appraisals to now where we rate our supervisors based on some specific leadership attributes in order to help them develop into better leaders. And then we also began working on a formalized succession planning process this year. So I want to congratulate Angie Cantor, our HR director. Thank you, Angie, for all of your efforts in terms of making sure that we are attracting and retaining an engaged workforce. And finally, financial focus. As you heard from John when he gave you the quarterly financial statements, the village is in excellent financial shape. And we continue to improve our financial condition pretty much every year as we pay off debt and really try to be as efficient as we can with the taxpayers' dollars. This year, John and his department continue to receive recognition externally with the Certificate of Excellence in Financial Reporting for the 24th consecutive year and the Distinguished Budget Award for the 10th consecutive year, both of those being the highest national and maybe even international awards or recognition programs for financial reporting and budgeting. So it's a tremendous accomplishment.
It is.
Yep. And he's already gone over pretty much the financials with you, but overall we're in great financial shape. Our capital asset condition ratio is in the red a little bit, and really what that is that's just measuring what our depreciable assets are, what the remaining useful life is of them. As things depreciate and get older, we expected it to go down, so it wasn't that much of a surprise. So I want to conclude, and I want to thank you for your time. I know you've had a lot of presentations today, but I just wanted to say that as I was preparing this report and the report that is online for the public, I honestly sat and just smiled with so much pride. I'm so proud of the accomplishments of this team. Our our department heads and the group of fantastic staff that they have put together to serve this community is really something that I'm proud of. So I just wanted to say thank you to them. Overall, those are the highlights. And I think that we are an organization that does look for ways to improve consistently. And I don't see that changing anytime soon. And with that, if you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer them.
Are there any questions for Natalie?
Two areas, Natalie, under provide multimodal transportation systems.
Yes, sir?
I think I look at, if there's 4 pillars here, it's pedestrian plan, comprehensive bicycle plan, greenway trail systems, and then roadways. And I see, I thought, if I understood correctly, ideally you like to get like 6.67 or something, so it's in the green area, and we're down a little bit below that. Roadways are the fourth part of that pillar. Do you or the staff have any recommendations as to how to get that needle moving? And for the first question, getting that needle moving in the right direction there?
And that's a good, I'm glad that you brought that up, because as you mentioned, we will use the survey results, and not just the survey results. We'll also look at other results in order to make some informed decisions during our strategic planning process. So, for example, in addition to just looking at resident satisfaction with street maintenance, we also look at our pavement condition rating that we obtain every 3 years. We also look at the level of intersection studies that we have done by traffic engineers. We also look at the 5-year rolling average of the amount of mileage that we pave. So we kind of do try to take as much data across sections and look at it. I would say, based on my review of everything, I do think we should have some conversations about street maintenance levels, and I think that once we get the data from Jason, the raw data, and we can look at it by neighborhood, and we can look at satisfaction with street maintenance in neighborhoods, on major roads. There's several questions. I think we need to pull all those together and look at them together.
So for the 4 pillars that I mentioned, do you think that the focus of attention would be on infrastructure and roadways as compared to bicycle paths, greenways, whatever? Again, I was looking at the way that multimodal was presented. Or the biggest movement might be to get in the direction that we would like to see it. The results would be in looking at roadways compared to the other three areas.
I would say, in addition to the satisfaction, I think we need to go look at the important satisfaction and how the residents rated their priority for capital investments. Sidewalks and pedestrian facilities are still up there. Street maintenance is still up there at the top. This year, bicycle paths made it into the top 4. So, from my perspective and what I'm seeing, I think we made great progress in terms of increasing satisfaction with the availability of sidewalks, but without looking at the data, you can assume that Village Acres residents are more satisfied, but we won't know until we actually, dig into it and figure it out. So at this point, I really wouldn't say that one should be a higher priority over the other. I think that it would be wise for us to look at all of them at strategic planning time.
Same question. How about your thoughts on professionally manage a high-performing organization? Because that was a bit lower than multimodal.
It was, and that was lower because of that dip in satisfaction with the level of involvement in public decisions.
Okay.
And that is what caused it.
Thank you.
Okay, any more questions or comments for Natalie? I think we need to give the staff a round of applause because you do such an excellent job, and we do appreciate it very much. Okay, at this point, we have been seated for almost an hour and a half. We are going to take a 5-minute break. We will resume at 6 o'clock on the nose.
state officials put on all the rest of us. But, you know, as is usually the case with John and the rest of our staff, he went out searching. And I guess it was about late last year, he was able to find a technology platform that might be able to achieve what the state was intended to require of us. And I don't know if it's still the case, John, but I think what you told me several months ago was we may be the first in the state to roll this thing out. And so this thing is ready to go, and so he's ready to give you all and the public a presentation about what good things it can do for us in our community.
A great introduction there. Yeah, the state of North Carolina did come out with, they gave cities and counties a 12-month window that you had to create these transparency sites. And a lot of these small towns in North Carolina didn't even have websites to do that. And the state eventually did back away from that requirement. But I think it's still cooking out there, and it's something that the state treasurer and others want to see happen eventually. So we have launched a platform at this point that we believe enables us to have a good level of transparency, and then even be more prepared in the future if those requirements come back to even take it farther. But in August, we partnered with a company called ClearGov out of Massachusetts. They're a leading municipal financial transparency platform. And we launched this, it's called an infographic-based Financial Transparency Center. So Financial Transparency Center is what we're calling it. We think it's a tool to give an easy-to-understand visual breakdown of the village's finances, as well as insights into some limited demographics, and then give some comparisons to peer communities. So you've seen us do our annual dashboards where we compare to other communities. Well, this is just basically going to be live year after year, 10 years worth of data available any day, any time, to a line item detail level for our residents. Okay? All right, so I'm going to give you a brief demonstration. I know you've had a lot of reports today. We're going to try to keep this quick, but there's a lot to see here, and we want to kind of go through it pretty quickly here today. So first of all, how to access the site. If you go to the village's website, and under our government, under mayor and village council, there's lots of resources here about our surveys and other things, but the Financial Transparency Center is located there. You can click on that. It's going to take you to a launch page that shows you a little bit about the Financial Transparency Center. I'll leave that there for now, but you can also go under departments and look under financial services, and you'll see the same, you'll get to the same place. Under financial services, there'll be a link to the site off of our page. Okay? So this gives a brief introduction to the Financial Transparency Center. You click on View Now. It will open up. There's a bit of a time lapse here for a redirect. And while I'm saying that, you'll begin to see how the site is organized. All right. So this is the Financial Transparency Center. We were, I believe, the second or third in North Carolina to actually go live with the information. It is national, okay? So what they're trying to do is build this center where you can compare us not only to folks inside North Carolina, but in other states and other regions as well. So we had to sort of comply with some of their terminology throughout the site. It's not customized just for Pinehurst because of that comparability to other communities. The first thing you'll note when you enter the site is that all the data here is organized by fiscal year. It defaults to the beginning year at 2018. That's our current budget year. But there's also historical information loaded all the way back to 2011 on the site. Okay? So when you're navigating the site, you need to make sure you know what year you're in at the top, and then you'll be looking at data from that year. The site's broken down into a couple, on the home page here, we have a demographic snapshot. There's going to be a financial overview, a debt section, and a reserve section. 3 of these 4 are pretty limited. The demographic snapshot's just kind of a overview. It shows our population, median home value, median household income. This is powered by data from the U.S. Census Bureau, and ClearGov has basic financial information for all cities and counties in North Carolina. Okay? Through 2016, they have the basic information. By subscribing to the site, you're able to load more current data, like 2017, and our budget for 2018 is also loaded. And then we're also able to load our line item detail information to give even more transparency. And that's where the real transparency comes, when we can give that full detail. The demographics, all this pulls from the U.S. Census Bureau, and the latest information available there is 2015. There's a financial overview listed here. It shows our revenues and expenses. You'll see here our budget is balanced. It also shows it in total, and it shows it per capita per year. The per capita per year is something you're going to see throughout the site. We also, as a subscriber, have the power to add comments to data where we feel an explanation is needed to help the user to navigate the site and understand the information. For instance, if the year of the U.S. Open, our fees spiked 1 year, we can put a comment and say, hey, this 1 year, this is what happened, so that they'll understand that trend line. Scrolling down a bit, you'll see revenue and expenses by year since 2011. The solid bars here indicate actual audited numbers, and the gray bars here indicate the budget. And you'll see those kind of grayed out, but that's the current year. Moving a little farther down, kind of a summary of our debt from 2011 to present, and you can see how that's declined over time to our current balance there on debt. And then reserve funds, they call it reserve funds. We would call this unassigned fund balance. Our fund balance over time, and you can see how that has changed and grown over time as we've been reserving funds for capital projects. Okay? So that's kind of the overview. Now, the reserve and the debt, you really can't drill any deeper on those. However, this financial overview is kind of where we're going to focus the rest of our time today. The financial overview gives you the top level, but you'll notice these view breakdown. We can begin to explore deeper into each of these areas. So if you click on revenues here, you'll see it jumps to a revenue page, and it shows the village's $19.1 million budget broken down by taxes, revenues from other governments, local receipts, and other financing sources. You can drill deeper on any section by just clicking on the slice of the pie, or if you go below, it gives you a view breakdown button that you can click on. Also, for each area, there is a line graph showing from 2011 through the budgeted number in 2018. Again, comments are available. We're able here to drill down, and I'm going to take an example here. Revenues from other government. You'll see I made a comment here, said North Carolina local option sales taxes are levied by the county, so the village's revenue from this sort is considered an unrestricted intergovernmental revenue. We can drill down, view breakdown, and we can see, what kind of, I'm going to have to drill a couple levels for sales taxes here. But you can see unrestricted and restricted areas. One more click. And we're down to our sales tax of approximately $3.3 million, or $216 per capita per year. The more detail, less detail is under each of our revenues and each of our expenditure areas, and we'll give you the detailed line item total for that, in this case, the budget year, or for the actual year that you're looking at. In some cases, there's multiple line items that are summarized in an area, like fees. You'll see a list of fees, and we'll see that more on the expenditure side as we go there. Okay. All right, so while looking at this, you'll see there's a blue bar here that says click here to see the most recent peer benchmark analysis. I remember I said that in 2016, they've gathered data from all other cities in North Carolina, and it will pull up a peer analysis for us. In the peer analysis here, you'll see a couple things. You'll see that we collect, in 2016, $199 per capita per year in sales taxes. And there's two peer analyses. This first one here is in actual dollars, how we compare to our peer group per capita per year. And then there's this statistically normalized grouping here, or chart here, that shows Pinehurst here and the average over here. At the bottom of any of these peer grouping charts, it gives information about who the peer communities are and a little bit about their demographic makeup. Now, I mentioned that you guys probably recognize these towns that we have in this peer grouping here: Southern Pines, Davidson, Cornelius. These are some of our standardized, and we have a Pinehurst custom peer group. If you'd like, ClearGov also has a default group. You can click on that and see a different group of peers, and it tells how they selected these peers. But you get into things where, different towns have differences that aren't comparable to us. I see some even here, like Carborough used to be in our custom peer group. But a site defaults to our custom group, but you can look at it both ways. Okay? So that's kind of how to navigate through the system. One last tip on navigation is at the top of each page, there's this, we call it a breadcrumb trail, where you can quickly jump back to a previous area to look deeper into an area. So we'll go back to the beginning now and just take a quick look at expenses. Back to our financial overview and look at expenses. Again, like revenues, it's very similar. You can click View Breakdown, However, when you get to the first page, you'll see our $19.1 million budget broken down by public safety, public works, culture and recreation, general government, capital outlay, planning and development, and debt service and transfers. This gives the public a really clear indication of what percentage of their tax dollars are going to what areas. Again, you can click on any slice of the pie, or you can scroll down and click view the breakdown, or to see a peer analysis. So let's go look at public safety. You can drill down here. We got our police and fire and inspections department. A little deeper, and it goes down, and you can see the police department here for the village, and it breaks it down by salaries, benefits, internal service charges. Now, these internal service charges are going to be our buildings, our vehicles, and our IT. And we actually charge that out to these service areas, so we're seeing the full cost of providing police services, not just the direct cost, and then some contracted services. And you can drill even deeper. If we go in here, we can say, I want to see, we have to remember now, we're in 2018, so this is budgeted. Supplies and equipment, we can go down here and look at that and say, well, that's uniforms, repairs and maintenance, what's involved in that particular area. Okay. And again, if you're, inclined, we can go back. We can do our peer comparisons. Get back one, excuse me for scrolling so quickly. Let me get back to a year that has peer comparisons, 2016. And we'll go back to police. And you can again view an analysis on that 2016 data and beyond. Behind that, you can look at that as well. And it'll show again how we stack up against other communities, what we're spending in real dollars per capita per year for those services. And again, you have the custom, or you can use the default group. And it's interesting that it has state averages on both of these. So it's going out and pulling that state data. All cities and counties have to report to the to the U.S. Census. There's a standardized expenditure and revenue form that we submit each year. It's called the AFIR. I know that doesn't mean anything, but we submit that. It goes up to U.S. Census, and these folks are gleaning that free data and getting state averages and baseline data for all communities, which kind of helps power the site. So I know that was kind of a lengthy presentation, but we're providing this Financial Transparency Center to better inform our residents regarding our financial situation, okay, what the village is doing with our finances. We hope that this will foster greater openness and transparency that will reflect positively on the village and our financial stewardship. North Carolina is the good government state. We believe the village is the good government village, and we want to make sure that we're open and clear about what's going on financially within the village. So if you have any questions about the site, I'm happy to take those at this time.
Any questions for John?
John, this is available now?
Yes, sir. It's been available actually for a little while. You probably saw some announcements go out. We just had to get on an agenda. It took us a little time, but.
So I'm kind of amazed. Did you provide them most of the data to put this together, or did they go out and search for it?
They had our 2016 and beyond, like they have for every town. They're getting it off of U.S. Census data that's available to them for free. What we had to provide to them was our budget and line item detail for 17 and 18. We just closed our audit, and we haven't even presented that CAFR to you guys. That'll be in November. So the other towns haven't released that publicly. I think it goes out usually here late fall. They probably get it in the spring. But we sent them data files on our budget and on our 17 numbers so that they could get that loaded up into the system.
Well, as you said, there are a lot of little towns. I cannot imagine how they're going to comply with this requirement.
A tool like this would make it more available to them to do so, but still would not be easy in some cases.
Any other comments or questions for John? Okay, thank you very much, John.
I had one final comment on the survey. I forgot to mention something earlier. This year, for the first time, we asked a question about, we asked an open-ended question. Mr. Bowlry asked us to add this to the questions about, is there any way, any suggestion on how the village might serve you better? And it was an open-ended comment section. In your survey, starting on page 132, there were about 9 pages of comments that came in through that. So look those over, peruse them, and if you as a council have an interest in us summarizing those for you in any way, please just let us know. We'll be glad to do that for you.
Okay, thank you, John. I'll look at that later. Next item?
Okay, John, I think you got this one as well, right? The budget amendment? And we had a very generous contribution to help our police department purchase naloxone kits for the patrol cars, and that wasn't in this year's budget, so John's got a budget amendment for you to consider.
Straightforward, you delegate to the manager the authority to move between items of expenditure, but this happens to be a new revenue source. So Sandhills Center for Mental Health contributed $1,950, and we need to appropriate that as a revenue and an expense, and it was to purchase 25 additional naloxone kits for our police vehicles to help in cases of overdose.
Okay. Each kit is disposable. Once you've used it once, you can't use it again. Is that it? Okay, thank you. Okay, I believe we need a motion on this one.
I move to approve ordinance 17-13, amending the fiscal year 2018 budget for the donation to the police department.
Second.
We have a motion by Claire Berger and a second by John Baldry. I'm sorry I didn't ask if you had any questions for John or for the chief on this, so that could be included if we have any discussion. Any discussion? Okay, then I'll ask for your vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, say no. Thank you very much. That's unanimous. Good deal. Okay, number 13.
Okay, next up, Jeff Batten is going to give you a presentation on the proposed community center. To refresh everybody's memory where we've been on this, you asked us to present a little bit more information or another look at the need for the need or desire for a community center in our community, and we gave you that presentation. What was that, about 6 weeks ago? Yeah. Mark was here. And so, it's not really clear where you want to go with this, but what we have done is we have put together a presentation to maybe summarize some of that factual historical data and survey data for you again, if you want to go back through that. And as Jeff will lay out, we just like to get your guidance on whether you want to continue this project. And if so, we have the option for you to consider 3 locations, and you may or may not choose at the end of this dialogue to give us guidance on one of those locations as well.
Okay, is there anyone who is opposed to going forward and looking at the 3 locations? Okay, let's look at the 3 locations.
Okay, well, let me quickly, I guess, ask you, there are 2 questions that we wanted to pose to you, and the first one is related to, and by the way, the picture up there is an architectural rendition based on a footprint of a building that we had already had in our folder and our files for a while. It's just to give you an idea of what something could look like.
Right.
The key there is basically we're trying to mirror up the appearance of our existing campus here. So the 2 questions is, on the first one is, do we proceed with design of the community center? And if the answer to that is yes, it is in the budget this year for design services, then we can jump down to talk about location. If the question is you want to go through the process of, yay or nay on continuing with our planned design process in FY18, then that will guide my slides a little bit in a different direction. So I'm flexible, let's put it that way.
Right,
And
right.
the only thing I had was pretty much a 30,000 viewpoint, 30,000
Okay.
square foot,
Yeah.
30,000 foot viewpoint, I should say.
Yes.
So if, again, if the answer is yes, we do want to proceed as planned, then we can jump down to the preferred location and see if y'all have any discussions relative to that or any direction that you're ready to provide relative to that particular item.
Okay. Then another way to put it is anybody opposed to number 1, proceeding with the design of the community center?
I think
I'm not opposed. I guess it's the order of things. Because I know we've talked about the size of it and the services and, what it would facilitate. And then when we had the discussion about the location, they're very different topologically. So how does that impact the design? So it's chicken or the egg?
It does impact the design. The location would make an impact on how the design would proceed. Topography and things of that nature definitely will come into play in terms of design. So if the answer is, again, that we do want to proceed with a design, then we could jump to, what is the preferred location, and then architecturally, they would have to look at that location, and it may change, some of the design components of a center on that particular site. And hopefully I've answered your question there, but maybe if not.
The intent, though, would be that regardless of which site you pick, the intent would be to accommodate the same suite of spaces on one site versus the other site versus the other site. So how those are arranged inside a building might be different given the topography on each of those individual sites, but the services provided and the space provided would be roughly equivalent.
You're looking at the footprint. You basically know. Thank you. You basically, my answer to number one is yes. I mean, I think we proceed. I mean, you know what you want to build from a footprint standpoint, and I understand what you're saying too. It might not be the same footprint. It'll be the same, will accomplish the same goal, have the same amount of office suites or gymnasium size, all that. It just might not be the same schematic, if you will, on every site. It's what you just saw from an architectural rendering isn't the final design either, and it might not look exactly the same on every site. So design's kind of a funny word because people in their mind might be, what's it going to look like? We want to know how it's going to function and how it's going to function on each site. So the answer to number one is, unless three people on this council want to say, at this point, no, I'm going to ask the question, why did you approve the budget 2 years ago?
Okay, let's look at it that way. For me, the answer to number one is yes, we want to proceed. John?
I think the answer for me is yes, we want to proceed. I think the idea of a community center, I think, is what our village needs. I like that idea, along with, in comparison to some other, another option. At least it was reported in the paper with respect to the county doing something further north, which was expanding an area and recreation center. I looked at that and thought through that, and I thought that's probably not, I would think, in the best interest of our village to not proceed with a community center for the village.
Don't rely on that.
And I think it's too far out of the way. Second thing, there are two studies that were done, and the studies go back a couple of years. And the study projected 18,000 square feet as the size of the community center. Maybe as we proceed, is that still approximately the right number for us to consider? Third thing is looking at what the cost is. The cost in the studies earlier, we're projecting a cost of $175 a square foot up to $200 a square foot. So that might be something we should be looking at as well. I do agree that depending upon which of the three sites, Cannon Park, Rassy Wicker, or across the street, the design certainly will change. Functionality, I think, should be the same. Interested in the amount of, of programs that are not supported currently by village facilities that would now be integrated and coming in. For instance, say the Pinehurst Elementary School, if there are programs that we could move into this community center, as opposed to would we still want to use the elementary school if it has to do with indoor basketball? So it's kind of looking at maybe, as Clark said, the functionality is a good idea on that. But Madam Mayor, the question that you asked is, should we proceed with the community center? I believe that the answer for our residents is yes.
Okay, thank you. John Cashin?
Yes.
Okay, yes, let us proceed.
Programmatic speaking.
Programmatically.
Thank you for that. It's been a long day, apparently. To Clark's point, what we had programmed, generally speaking, was 4 assorted sizes of meeting rooms that are tailored in general to different types of activities, not specific, but when you're looking at dance, exercise, and those kinds of things, there's a room with mirrors, sound system, proper flooring, as opposed to, arts and crafts room, which is kind of a different environment. So there were 4 essential different sized meeting rooms that could be programmed into in a gymnasium, and that's kind of what we looked at, as well as some office space. To your question about Pinehurst Elementary School, we currently do use Pinehurst Elementary School primarily for day camps and a few of the adult and youth programs, basketball, wiffle ball, those kinds of things, adult basketball, in the gymnasium. Our intent would be to continue to use the gymnasium to the extent that we could. So some of the things would move out of that into a community center. And I think what's important relative to that specifically is the qualitative piece of it. It's not knocking Moore County Public Schools, but the gymnasium has no air conditioning, no heat. Has heat, but we get very little of it. We have to purchase what we can get on Saturday mornings.
How do you purchase what you can't get on Saturday
We
morning?
pay per hour for.
Quarters in a little machine or
We,
something?
we work with the central office, and they control all the heat, and we have to purchase a few hours of heat on Saturday morning so that the gym is not
Until the kids
freezing
start
cold
sweating and then they're,
at 8 o'clock in the morning.
Then it gets too hot.
And then it gets too hot. So lack of heat and AC accommodations within there. Particularly our day camps, things of that nature, they also, working out there out of the school, they have no air conditioning throughout the summer. We get comments like, I wish our child's lunch could be refrigerated. Children are worn out because they've been in a hot building the whole time, things of that kind of nature. So really, I think from a quality standpoint, that's where we're really suffering. And if you look at the community survey results that were shown earlier, the areas that we lag behind in are the quality. It's not
Indoor
all
recreation.
just facility, but that's a large part of quality. In any event, I think that's kind of the things that would come into play relative to the school. The school's also going to be torn down in 2025 and will be under construction for a couple of years. So at that point, we have nowhere to go.
I think my understanding of what we're talking about is in fact a community center would support all residents. That is the youth of the village, and also for adult activities. So I look at more of it as in fact a community center and not a recreation center. I had Mark Wagner drive me around last week looking at the 3 sites. One of the questions I asked him was, are there shower facilities in the proposed design, the community center? And the answer to that was no at this time. So I still think for me it's a community center is what I would like to see. And naming sometimes is important on what we call it. So I'm inclined to say yes for a community center and not to rely on something like a recreation center.
I think that's a great point. A community center is more broad than just recreation services. It's more broad than just youth recreation. It does serve adult recreation. I think somewhere in the neighborhood of 40 to 45% of the Parks and Recreation participants are adults today. But could a community group use a room in there on Tuesday night for an event or a meeting? Absolutely. Would the civic group want to hold a meeting in there for some purpose outside of this room for whatever reason? Certainly. It would be another opportunity for additional things beyond just recreation. And so your point is very well made. It can serve multiple different needs of the community.
In my discussion with Mark also, we talked about users of a community center in Pinehurst, not only for the residents of the village, but also would be open up to others outside the village. There might be a fee attached to that for them to come in and use it. So it would be open for Southern Pines or Aberdeen or whoever else.
It could be, and in most likelihood, they usually are, and there are opportunities to do things, as you say, a membership, non-resident membership, where they pay an annual fee to have the ability to use the facility. In some cases, it can be advantageous to have some non-participant participation, or non-resident participation, I should say, because most of our classes, we have minimum numbers. If we don't make the minimum number, we're not going to incur the expense to pay for the instructor, because the fees that they pay are paying for that. And non-residents pay considerably, may pay 50% to 100% more, depending on the program. than the resident pays in anyway. So they help absorb a greater portion of the cost, direct cost of providing a program. But yes, at this point, that would probably be the intent. Do we want to jump down to preferred kind of
I believe so.
locations? Okay, let me get us down there. Let me hurt one thing real quick right here. This is a slide that Mark put up for you back in August. The only thing I want to point out here is the third item from the bottom, net projected expense. This is operating costs plus debt service, less what the anticipated expanded fees, programs that we would collect fees for. So the net is, as you can see, starting in 2020, around 158,000, and it moves to 160 and 161. But the only thing I want to point out is in 2020, we make our final debt payment on the fire station, 91. That debt payment's $170,000. So from a debt standpoint and an operating standpoint, it's revenue or budget neutral to us in the grand scheme of things. Want to make that quick
Thank you.
point. Okay, relative to the three potential locations, Cannon Park, which is the site of the old Village Hall that burned in 1994, at the corner of Highway 211 and Rattlesnake, Rassy Wicker Park, beside the police department, across the street and kind of down a little bit, and then behind the Village Hall here and kind of below the tennis courts. Some things to think about relative to selecting a preferred location: accessibility, traffic implications, infrastructure availability, costs related to that, synergy, shared parking, other amenities that are around it that can sort of work in tangent with it, and then future expansion opportunities if those become necessary down the road. So again, the site, kind of just a general idea of what it could look like. So this represents kind of an aerial of Cannon Park with the center sitting at the old Village Hall site. So that is in kind of the middle there with the big green roof, and you can see the parking is kind of around the front, the side, and the rear. A couple of things relative to that we just sort of brainstormed very quickly about some pros and cons there. Good access to athletic fields and playgrounds within the park itself. It's probably the lowest site work cost because it is flat already. It has, obviously access for water and sewer and those kinds of things right there. And it's probably the most accessible to the general public, being that it's right there off of the main highway and onto Rattlesnake. Some of the downsides of that site could be it's really the least useful for shared parking for activities that go on here at Village Hall and the Arboretum. And it also could create some traffic challenges at Highway 211 and Rattlesnake intersection. We do have room there if we needed to install a turning lane, those kinds of things. We can encroach in on the park side, but those are a couple of things to keep in mind. This is a site kind of down the hill from us right here. It's across the street from the meadow and across the street from the Village Hall, but down a little bit. So this is a site by the police department. You can see the parking kind of being located up closer to the Village Hall to serve Village Hall large meetings and things of that nature, as well as could serve for shared parking with the Arboretum. And again, just some pros there. Again, I mentioned the shared parking with the Village of Pinehurst main campus here and park and Arboretum events. Kind of makes the best use of what we sort of have as some dead property in Wicker Park across the road and down. It's really not sized big enough to do a whole lot with. So it may actually make a good building situation. It alleviates the need to invest otherwise in sprucing up that area across the street and down the hill a little ways. It's pretty raggedy as it is today. And then there's, again, this is just sort of a side thing for downtown events, parking closer for shuttles to run downtown. A lot of people may not realize, but like all the Live After Fives and several other downtown events, we run shuttles from here downtown and back to try to help alleviate some of the parking concerns and problems that occur downtown. So
And people park in the fire?
they park here in Village Hall for the evenings and out front, and they can use the fire department, and they can also use Wicker Park parking lot over there with the active recreation areas.
Okay.
Kind of on the downside, from the standpoint of synergy with other recreation amenities, we've got a good variety of amenities here in Wicker Park. probably more, we actually have more variety here than we do in Cannon Park. The only thing is just getting kids in from the center and over to the splash pad area and the tennis courts and all that. We just, you have to cross Magnolia Road, and that's really,
It's a lot less, there's a lot less traffic than there is on Rattlesnake Trail.
absolutely, absolutely. And we've got a pretty good network of sidewalks already in place here.
Exactly.
Then this gives you sort of an idea of being behind Village Hall here. This is in a wooded area that is already existing. There's a trail that loops around this area. You can see the tennis courts are there. Those are existing, and this is just below those tennis courts. And the Village Hall is in the lower left-hand side there. So this is back across Rassy Wicker Drive is where this location
Where
is
is the
sitting.
parking for this one, Jeff?
It is in a variety of locations. You can see, and unfortunately, I don't think this has a pointer on it, does it?
At the darkened areas, are those?
Doesn't. I just turned it off. Natalie already told me not to hit that button.
You just got too close,
Did it anyway,
you just got too close to the asphalt.
if that one works. Okay. You can't see, obviously you can't see what I'm pointing at, but parking, there's some parking right here, there's some parking right here, and then there's parking that sort of wraps around. So parking here, here, and wrapping around this way. I don't think there's any on this side, if I recall correctly.
I don't think that does a great deal to help additional parking at Village Hall.
It would be a stretch, and the primary reason I would say it'd be a stretch is based on the historical use of the overflow lot at fire department adjacent to us. Many times you'll come here for a large events, and there'll be parking up and down Magnolia Road, and there's nobody, all this will be full back here, but there'll be nobody parking adjacent to the fire station. So whether they realize that's available to them or not, there is a sign that says additional parking there with an arrow, but nonetheless, that is what it is. Accessible to splash pad, tennis courts, soccer fields, don't have to cross any roads, it's right there. Kind of nestling that into the surrounding trees is kind of, it could be visually pleasing. It sort of would disappear. But on the downside, we lose a mature wooded terrain that's in the heart of the village here. That's a pretty nice passive area as it is today. So that's just a concern. And then highest likely site work cost because of the slopes that are present on that. The way that the center sets up over there, it sits more cross slope, whereas down here on the bottom of the hill, there's some topography issues here, but facing the building potentially allows the back of the building to be a little bit lower where the gym portion is, which would naturally have a higher ceiling. So, but that one it could be a little more expense involved. And then it's really kind of the least accessible of all of them to the general public, just because of the number of turns you got to get to get there from behind the building. It's not a drastic issue, but if you're looking at everything in sum total, it's probably the least accessible to the public. So those are kind of just the pros and cons. As Jeff indicated, it might be helpful to get a little bit of direction today, but if you feel like it's something that you need to think about, that's okay. It's kind of your pleasure of kind of where you want to go.
Looking at the one across the street from Village Hall, which is the bottom one, now, did you put in some landscaping there, or did the artist put in some landscaping, or is that existing, or?
The tree line that is across the street that runs down Magnolia Road, that's between the meadow and the street, is existing. The rest of this has been plugged in back in here. This is all artificially placed by the architect. I'll borrow one there real quick.
Between the community center and the Greens project? Yeah, I think what you see right there is a depiction of what was there prior to the Greens project kicking off. And so some of that has come down, some of it is still there. I think ultimately if we develop that site for this community center, or if we don't, we're going to need to spend some money doing something else over there. And to get to your point, with that potential location, I think we would need to do something more visually pleasing that wraps around the right side and behind that building.
Something more visually
To
pleasing
spruce it
than
up a
what's there now.
little bit, a little bit better, but it would be incorporated into this design.
Okay, anybody have any questions or want to state a preference or?
I'd like to ask about parking, how you're estimating number of spaces and things like
That's a
that.
good question. It's based on the PDO requirement for this type of use, and I think, I should know this, it's 122 parking spaces, I think. Don't hold me to that one, but the number of spaces that are represented here are specifically related to the PDO requirements,
The size of the building, probably.
based on the building and the type of use.
And I know the last time we talked, there was something about some of the infrastructure costs and things like that, depending on, and I know you said the infrastructure is probably the least expensive or minimal issue at the Cannon Park location. So if you had to go 1, 2, 3, which one would have biggest infrastructure costs? And
I believe the biggest infrastructure cost would be the one behind the Village Hall. There is a gas line, water line, and sewer all available to definitely the site across the street and down the hill, readily available. And gas, I'm not positive, but I believe it is also running by Cannon Park by 211. The water sewer, of course, is already there from and the meter, in fact, is still there from when the building burnt down, or at least the vault where the meter was.
I kind of like the idea of maintaining kind of like a campus where this is our whole campus and our, our police and fire and village hall and our community center and all of our activities are kind of in close proximity to each other. So that's, even though probably the cheapest as far as site design would be Cannon Park because it is flat, it's just kind of out there. And I like the campus kind of idea, keeping our public buildings together, looking alike.
Let me repeat myself that I'm in favor of a community center. Part of my discussion with Mark Wagner was on a slightly different tact, and the question that he and I were discussing was which location for a community center would best align with a long-range plan the village has that would best serve the residents of the village of Pinehurst. And that is, where might that location be? So we didn't have an answer, but the question kind of goes back to, from a larger perspective, instead of where we may be looking at individual sites, but expand our thinking as to where might such a facility best serve the interests of the village of Pinehurst. So in thinking along those lines, I agree that campus is a great idea, but my thought at the moment, and I think probably will benefit from lots of discussion, I'm not very enthused about doing something behind the village hall. Looking at where it might go, I'm a jogger and a walker, so there's in fact a nice greenway path that goes around that area. But I kind of like maintaining the presence of the natural part of Wicker Park behind us. Looking across the street here, I think I'm a little concerned about the growth of large facilities and buildings. We have the village hall, we'd have the police station, we've got apartments going up, and then we're going to put in something which would be another large edifice, which would be the community center. The campus for me, I think, is at the moment, in my thinking, is out at Cannon Park, and here's why. I like the access off 211. If we need to make another cut where there's a I believe there's a veterans memorial that's there in front of off that road. We have baseball fields there. We have facilities for Camelot Park. We have picnic areas there. Again, for me, this is a community center, and I'm focusing on facilities and programs for youth as well as for adults. So cost is a factor for me. I know last time we talked, I'm still intrigued by having some defraying the cost, if we can, with a public-partner relationship. Not a partner relationship, say, with, could be with the hospital or somewhere else, but I would certainly like to think if there were some private donations that could come in to offset the cost. I like that. There are lots of challenges for the village. We've heard about roadways and infrastructure. So if we can defer some of the cost or some of the debt, and we could align through some budget alignments where we could meet other high priorities for the village. That's kind of where I'm thinking.
I guess I'm thinking, is this microphone working? I'm just thinking that we don't need to go on the cheap for a community center. And since we are designing this year, and then the next year we'll start construction, when are we going to do the outreach to see if anybody wants to give us money? When are we going to do that, and who's going to do that? We should have been doing that for the past couple of years.
I'm not opposed for me to do it. If somebody needs to take up and be ownership for it,
Well-
along with if there are some others who might want to who might want to explore this option. It may not go anywhere, but I certainly like the option of having some residents who may want to participate in this. Don't know, but I would like to see if that might turn out to be a viable option.
When we spoke about this before, I think we mentioned that naming rights would probably be the most popular thing at this point. I know there's a lot of fundraising that goes on in this community. I see a member of the library board here, and we've been trying to fundraise for the library. It goes it's very difficult, and this may be a different animal because it is a community center, but I don't know what a better fundraising project is than the library. That's a pretty good fundraising project, and it's been difficult, but I just feel that I don't see the problem with having another big building across the street. It's our campus, and the only other big building that isn't our campus is the Greens Apartments. And with a nice big buffer between us, we separate us from something that's not on our campus.
I have some questions about behind here too, because of the access to it coming off of 211. I think that might impact the residents over there. It's, I guess, the Murdochsville Road intersection for people to come up and then down through to get to it, besides Magnolia.
That would be
Yeah, that'd be
correct. The McKenzie Road would be the access point onto Wicker Drive from the west side.
Also, in the design, is there any thought to outside picnic tables, some kind of a pavilion kind of thing like that?
We have not gotten that far in any kind of thought process right now.
You mentioned something about expansion, down the road. So I keep leaning towards the Cannon Park area because it's already identified as a recreational area. It's pretty well established. You can see it from the highway. We're not going to take down too many trees. And then for folks, if they want to go have something to eat or take a walk, they can go right into the developed area where, Maxie's
Shelter
is.
right
and-
adjacent to it.
Yeah, and the sidewalks are going in and things like that. So I think it's more of a connector location, a connecting site for the center.
Ashen.
Couldn't hear him.
I said I don't have any comments.
I heard you that time.
Clark, do you have any comments?
Was I wrong for, I couldn't hear you, I honestly couldn't hear you. I don't think it was a bad
That's
question.
fine, that's fine.
I mean, they're all good comments. I don't know what to say. I mean, Village Hall used to be at one of the proposed sites out there at Cannon, and my first instinct was not to do it in Cannon, and Yet, I might be swayed to think that that is a good location to do it. I think with a segue into what our next topic is today, we'd have an opportunity to enhance that whole road and increase it and add a whole lot of public parking. So we've got a lot of opportunity there to do two things long-term. And it having been there before, I'm just not against, at first I just didn't think it was the right place for it, but I'm actually starting to think that it might be. Originally, I thought behind the Village Hall is a great place to do it, and when you see it sort of an aerial view and you think about how you're going to get in there, I know how to get there and wouldn't travel by car, so but everybody who would, it would be sort of a serpentine method to get there. I envisioned it being closer to the tennis courts and closer to the existing parking, and a whole lot closer. All those trees in between, actually, those go with. There'd be more coming down, but more being left up. Where if you move the building closer to the tennis courts, I just envisioned it being closer to what's existing infrastructure, and didn't envision that there would be so much buffer. And you could use the existing parking, and you'd be near the park and the splash pad and the whole thing. That's my favorite site up here. I don't know, the topographical stuff doesn't bother me one bit. That's just moving dirt and bringing dirt. That's not a hindrance in any situation. But if there was a way to maneuver it closer to the parking, saving as much wooded area as possible, that would be my preference. Depending on if you can pull that off. I just feel like there's a lot of parking right there out in the open. It's near all the facilities that are there. It's on the campus. That rendering there and the one by the tennis courts makes you feel like you're farther away from the Arboretum than you really are. You can see the Timmel building right there. It makes you feel like you're farther from Village Hall than you are. When you're standing at the tennis courts, you turn around, you're at the Village Hall. So don't be misled by that picture that you're that far from the campus. That picture of the one across the street next to the police station, I think it makes you believe that it's just that simple. You just plop it down and it's right there. That one doesn't do it for me, but I'm just one person's opinion.
My concern about the Cannon Park location is a lot of our summer day camps. That's a lot of our business, let's say. In order to access anything other than a ball field or Cannon Park, the children will have to either be bused or walk. And I guess if you could put in some sidewalks, but there aren't any sidewalks.
No, there's sidewalks, and you get across the street, and we just put one in. You can get to,
Sidewalk on the across the street currently, paralleling the Manor Care.
And again, we're about to
Right there.
We're about to talk about another topic in a few minutes that hopefully will move forward, and we've got an ability we'll own that whole corridor. So that part, the pedestrian part, it's a park. Heck, you can walk along the grass and get to the corner. I'm not worried about that. I understand the need in the summer, but that's just, again, one component in a grand scheme of how you figure this out. If we're talking about a so many week program to get and not make a decision because of that, they do a lot of walking already. I don't want to not make that decision because of one component, although it's a good one. It's a hard decision.
That was going to be my question. How much walking do they have to do now, or transporting kids for the recreational things?
They go to the elementary school, so a little bit further.
They walk to Cannon Park currently, and they walk occasionally over here to Wicker Park to the splash pad and that kind of thing as well. They do it now. And,
okay, so they're used to
flip
being
around here and
pedestrians.
Make sure Dave agrees with me, or Nicole.
A bulk of what they'd be
That's
doing
easy.
would be at the community center. If it's 95 degrees out, they're generally going to be in the air-conditioned space, so.
Is there room for expansion at Cannon Park? Because I know there are soccer fields there.
I think there's actually probably room at all three sites. All of them have probably sufficient acreage, if you will, to expand at any one of those three locations if in the future that became necessary.
Do the kids use the fitness center's pool?
No, I do not believe we do. Half day. The half day does. Half day is at First Health, right?
The half-day camp?
Half day
uses the-
camp. We do a half day camp and a full. The half day is based at First Health Fitness Center. They apparently do use the pool a little bit.
That's a
when
little
it's
bit
available.
closer. Okay.
Jeff, in reference to the bottom item there, which is the one across from the Arboretum and next door to the police station and such, but isn't that a lot bigger drop-off than this appears to be? It is quite a bit of.
It's definitely steeper up by the parking area that they're showing here. It begins to level out a little bit down in here. Jeff, that you would agree, presume, it kind of levels out a little bit down the hill into this territory, but it is steeper right up in here.
Yeah, it's not bad where that building is depicted. It's actually relatively flat there compared to, for example, this location that's behind Village Hall over here.
I know when we talked about putting parking across the street, I don't know, that was a couple of years ago, that was one of the issues, the steepness. So if you had to go down in the ingress
Right.
and egress, just
So
putting parking down
if
there.
you stand out in front of Village Hall right now and you look directly across the street, you get that visual. It drops off rapidly and then it kind of bottoms out at the bottom there. Once you're in that bottom, if you look to your right, it's not all that unlevel going all the way over to where the building is depicted here in this diagram. And it's not all that unlevel from where that building is depicted coming right straight forward out onto Magnolia Road either. There's a little bit of undulation in there, but it's not insurmountable.
There need to be steps if that were used for additional parking for Village Hall.
Yeah, I would recommend it, yeah.
It would alleviate the constant lining up and down Magnolia. When you see all the cars up and down Magnolia, I think people would be more likely to use something right across the way as additional parking. But,
Not at first, only as overflow.
I'm sorry?
Not only as overflow, you're still gonna have people drive
Oh,
up,
up and
park on the
down,
side.
of course,
You're
of
not gonna
course,
stop
yeah.
that.
Mhm.
Put
Still
parking
closer.
meters in.
One thing we didn't mention about the lower spot, and I'll just put it on the table just so you're aware of it. If you've looked at the layout in the plan for Wicker Park, there, Kelly Road is actually shown on the plan to extend right up to the front of the Village Hall, right through there. And the only reason I say that is it does give another sort of a backdoor entrance to that particular location that if that road were to be built out to Kelly, as it's already shown as a right-of-way when the property was platted out here. So it's just another item that comes into play here.
And that would be our responsibility to build it out.
Absolutely.
And
If you
that would
wanted to, we
offer
don't have to.
greater access from that site to get over to McIntyre as well for folks that want to go to the restaurants after
Yep.
spending time in the recreation facility.
It would give you really 3 access points from, Magnolia Road one direction, Magnolia Road the other direction, and then potentially Kelly out the back.
Can we at least eliminate the one behind Village Hall? Is there anyone who would be?
I'd agree with that.
Okay. So we can eliminate one. Okay, we have across the street and we have Cannon Park.
Have Parks and Rec made a determination, they're the ones that understand the programs and the use and what the comings and goings and all that. Have you guys sort of collectively thought of which one would work best based on the programs that we provide?
Facility itself, obviously, is going to be the same regardless of the location in terms of its programmability. you know, it's hard for me from the standpoint, I've been here since 1995, and as we've gone through the years, it's just always in my mind had been Cannon Park was the location, and we weren't quite looking as much across the street. So I've kind of got probably a little bit of a biased thought process. Say that with, you know, all honesty. I don't know, or I believe Mark has a similar bias, and I think it's more because of just not really thinking extensively about the opportunity across the street. I think the opportunity across the street does present some unique or good pluses for the village particularly relative to the shared parking situation that we do have large events down here, and, you know, that's a bit of an issue it would help with. But, you know, at the end of the day, you know, it's collectively your decision. One thing, if we've eliminated one, that we could do is engage, when we engage the architectural firm on this design process, is potentially have them evaluate those two sites in greater depth based on their experiences and provide us some additional pros and cons that could help maybe lean you one way or the other. So that as a way potentially forward from today.
So in other words, we would ask for an evaluation of both sites.
Could do that, and then from there, he would launch, the company, whatever the firm would be, would launch into, you know, a design once you've agreed with. I mean, they'll provide you the pros and cons, and then, you know, still going to be kind of up to you. These pros and cons we've provided are, you know, are kind of collectively our thoughts. But an architectural firm that does this on a regular basis, in theory, might look at a few other things that maybe we would not have ordinarily looked at.
You know, I guess my question originally about how does it fit into a larger plan, I'm thinking from a village and regional city and regional planning perspective. If we were going to look at the village as a whole, and maybe if we look at the demographics, you know, Cannon Park for me I like because Village Acres is across 211. There are a lot of youth that are there. I like the idea of 211. That's a good road for access from other residents coming in. I like it because it's out in the open, and so if there's some programs that are going to be in the evening for adults who may have you know, problems driving at night, maybe there's better visibility there for them. So from a city and regional planning perspective, Jeff, those are the kinds of things that I kind of think about, that maybe if we have somebody who could help it. What I would like not to do is I'd like not to delay in kind of working through this, but there's some questions like that for me that I think are appropriate for us to answer.
One good positive thing about all three locations is in the grand scheme of things, based on where our parks are located and where the bulk of the population is, it's fairly centrally located. Between number 6 and the lake area, you know, this kind of hits the middle of the geographic boundaries of the village, so to speak. So I think staying in this vicinity is a good location for accessibility to the greatest number of people. Going out to, say, West Pinehurst Park, for example, is pretty far out in one direction. At one, you know, when we bought that property, it was annexations were different days back in those times, and you could annex property relatively easily, and that was the growth corridor that was shaping up for the village. I don't think we're looking to necessarily go in a different direction, but this campus here or the Cannon Park location are certainly the most centralized for the population. Now, are there other things relative to a planning purpose that may come into play? Steve and Bruce may have some input there, as well as an architectural firm that we would engage.
And I think that's exactly what I was trying. I'm not being a city and regional planner, but we have the staff members who are the professionals in this
Exactly.
area.
And, you know,
Jeff.
again, you know, if you're looking beyond just the structure and the location, and you think in terms of, is Rattlesnake Trail going to ultimately become a main entry point into an additional commercial development area, then is this another springboard towards that. I don't know exactly, but
Does the village own all the land, when we're talking across the street, from this, where this design is, all the way over to Rattlesnake Trail?
all the way over.
Rattlesnake Trail, no.
What's the
no.
next street over? Rattlesnake Trail.
Yeah, we own the acre
You
that's up
you own the
behind it.
road, just the right of way to get there, but everything else is owned by others.
This
There's that 1 acre tract that
1
They just-
acre we own right here.
that they just vacated, that just touches it.
We own that. I'm not, does that, they don't touch boundaries right
It may
here.
be a corner that touches it.
Just
Yeah.
barely, yeah.
Yeah.
You know where the county just vacated? That corner touches our corner.
So it's just a corner?
Yeah, it's
So
not, it's
there's
not,
somebody that owns all that vegetation in between?
that's us. We own diagonally across there.
Which side, Jeff? Does that line touch on this side or this side?
I want to say it's right there, yeah, in that
Right here?
front corner.
Yep.
Comes down this way?
I think the
Or this
corner of
way.
this lot goes between the Greens project and that rendering, right, up to that corner, and then it shoots over
I can't remember where the
Horizontally.
line comes down, somewhere along
and
there.
diverges from the back edge of that acre lot.
But not a long stretch
And
of
then
land
comes
all the way
back
to
at
Rattlesnake
And then it
Trail.
comes back at an angle this way. So we think we come to a point up there, something like that. I can't remember. I haven't looked at it in a while.
Right, and we need to have some, some way forward on this.
Well, having them look at two is, I mean, that's kind of where we are. I mean, that's,
I think that's fine with
What,
me.
if that's the way you want to proceed, maybe you can give us some guidance on what you want out of that effort. Do you want them to give us a site evaluation only? Do you want a site evaluation with more detailed renderings of what a project might look like there? I mean, all those things have cost implications, and I'm not sure how it's going to wrap up with what we have in the budget right now, but
Could we do something like, basically what we want, what does that look like? If we want to do some kind of an expansion, what would that look like? And do maybe a couple of phases, like to address the most immediate needs that our surveys have indicated and our studies. You know, short term, this is what we have to accommodate now. But given projections, you may want to expand, I don't know, a couple more rooms or another gymnasium or add more parking or, you know, a more defined picnic area. And just based on experience of other community centers, how do they grow with a community that's growing?
you want that for each location?
Heck, yeah, if we could get
Yeah, if
that.
we're going to, and perhaps some coordination or at least some discussion with the planning staff, the recreation staff, as, you know, being the professionals in those areas.
I guess my challenge with that is, you know, when I think about how a building is designed, it's designed from the inside out. And so you're really asking them to go through the soup to nuts of designing a building for each of those locations, which is going to imply the costs associated with designing the soup to nuts of
Well-
each one of those buildings, and then contemplate how you would expand those buildings given the available space that's there.
But
When
if we have the footprint that we agreed is the footprint, that's where we start. And then perhaps they query us on, if this satisfies your needs for 2 or 3 years, what do you envision being added to it, or the expansion? And then maybe at that junction, we say, well, we don't need that information to get fully developed and spend the money on it.
As long as that footprint it can be accommodated on both those locations. And it may or may not. We had this discussion earlier that topography might change you to rearrange how those pieces fit together. But if you want to just take that outline or sketch of a building and have them do what these folks did at a more detailed level and actually make better use of the available topography and information we have, we could do that, I think. And in every case, I'm sure that they will be able to lay a building out on the ground and design the parking such that there's still a room to add on to the building. So I'm not sure what we would get from that other than just showing that it's feasible.
And I'm with Jeff on that, with just exactly what you hit the nail on the head with what you just finalized with, is what are we accomplishing? You're still, if you can do both at both, we're back to today. Which one are we picking? Because
Well-
they're going to be able to accomplish both on both sides. There's
And-
enough
and-
flat land across the street, you move dirt, that's easy enough. So all we're doing is paying for 2 drawings at that point. And it's, I really think that we have to consider Cannon Park. I think I think
I think
if
that's the
we've got a
best
consensus
location.
of a majority that and the comment about the children, they're going to be walking over somewhere anyway. They go to whether they also walk to Cannon Park from wherever they are during the day to go over to Camelot Park. So, you know, if you're in an air-conditioned space playing all day and then you're outside doing some activities or under the picnic area and you're walking over to a splash pad,
Or
you're going to
riding
get
your
wet,
bike.
and you're
Or
going to get
riding
wet,
your
and you're going to play,
bike,
and then you go
you
back
know?
to whatever. I mean, I'm not, that one doesn't figure in. You know, whatever we do is going to be way better than what we have today for kids, for teenagers, for, you know, elderly, whoever's using this. It's better. John makes great points about visibility at night and location for driving at night. I know they already do functions at the rec center now at night, and their complaints are parking or lighting or, you know, whatever it is. You make a great point that what are we accomplishing by getting 2 drawings? Now we got 2 drawings, right?
That's true, that's
So-
true. And I can see that the site across the street, if we really want some more parking for Village Hall, we can do a parking lot over there.
I was going to say that
We've
earlier. If we still want to do that, and
contemplated it,
you
yeah.
did it
Doing a
before, and
community center
it
over
wasn't a huge expense. It was a $100,000 range or something like that.
Might have been less than that.
And if parking is that paramount, and I'll say it, the last function that the Arboretum, that was parking up and down McCaskill, up and down Magnolia at the Traditions, there probably is a need to spend that kind of money on a decent parking lot for those functions. That's, you know, the parking's easy. I mean, we didn't ever finish that conversation probably, or just decided to table it, but I think if we're going to go forward from tonight, we have to pick a site, and I really do. I think it's Cannon Park.
I would say you have the best opportunity to do it with the one on the bottom, to make it, and it would give you the parking across the street, it gives you and if you're able to expand some parking out also, that would take care of, I think, more things at one point, the parking, the location, and the opportunity to expand it out.
You're talking about the one
I'm
across
at
the
bottom,
street?
right across the street, one's across the street.
We got Cannon Park, we got it across the street.
I think Cannon Park.
Or Cannon Park?
I'm very much in favor of Cannon Park.
Okay, I think that the consensus is Cannon Park, and we'll get, you know,
One drawing.
one drawing, one assessment of the site.
We can just build that into the design
Just be a
contract,
criteria.
right? Yeah.
Expansion would
Give
be a
you an initial look
criteria
at what it looks
of-
like and-
Of a design, standard design requirement.
Okay, that was kind of painful. The next one, 14. I think you're up on this one, too.
I am. We spoke in closed session, I believe it was in August, on this particular matter. We have the opportunity to acquire the 1 acre of property at the corner of Rattlesnake Trail and McCaskill Road. It's the site-
Otherwise known as that ugly, nasty pool.
The old pool site.
Okay.
It's obviously immediately adjacent to Cannon Park, easily could fold into Cannon Park. We have negotiated with the owners of the property and would propose a land swap cash arrangement with them. What would happen if you agreed for us to move forward with this is the village would give up 3.2 acres of property that we own up on Juniper Lake Road. That property would be adjacent to the property that we swapped the county with not long ago. We would also provide $20,000 in cash, and we would cover survey and legal expenses to subdivide that property. That gives a total value, projected value of about $57,640. In exchange, the village would receive the 1 acre at the corner of Rattlesnake and McCaskill, and we have estimated that value at around $60,000. So we would be within what we feel like is the legal statutory requirements for receiving fair compensation for what we're giving up and what we are receiving. If council is so inclined to go in this direction, we would ask you to actually formally take a vote on October the 10th. There are requirements for us to do public notification in advance of a vote. So we kind of need direction as to, yes, this is a direction you would like to go. You would like to acquire that acre, and you're okay with this terms or the terms of this agreement. And if that's the case, then we can proceed on beginning to get the paperwork pulled together to make this happen. And then on October 10th, you would vote to authorize the mayor or designee to execute all necessary documents. We might have the documents ready by then, but we likely would not. But at that point, you would, once you formalize your vote, then everything can move forward.
Yes.
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 Jack is holding something up in the air. I would entertain a short, relevant comment on this subject, yes.
Nasty, ugly pool served for 50 years.
Jack, I'm not saying,
Community.
Jack,
Now, number two, I stood here 4 years ago and asked the village council, when you were preparing the 2013-2014 budget, for $20,000 to rehab and keep the pool open for another 4 or 5 years. It was denied. I know quite a bit about this situation, and I am 100% for the swap. As a competitive swimmer, I'd love to see a competitive swimming organization in this area, and particularly in the village of Pinehurst. However, as a citizen and a taxpayer, I am adamantly opposed to the terms and conditions that have been proposed. Let's think about it. The village, this organization, we being the Community Swimming Association, gave this 1 acre to them in 2014 free. It was a gift, under the pretense that a swimming facility would either be rehabbed or put in that location. They made a genuine effort to raise money. They made a genuine effort to try to rehab the pool, although they have spent no money on the pool, apparently. But it
you
hasn't
can't be
happened.
heard, Jack, because you're not talking into a microphone.
So what you're asking the Village of Pinehurst voters or taxpayers to do is, in order to give away 3 acres of property that we own, we are going to provide $20,000 to this organization. They, in fact, own this as a gift 3 years ago, and in fact, pay no real estate taxes on this property, nor will they, of course, pay real estate taxes on the future property, 3 acres, because they're a 501c3, and they do not pay real estate taxes. And in fact, it looks like the village, or at least someone, is going to have to spend $25,000, $35,000, $40,000, $50,000 to demolish the facility that's presently there. So the total cost for the village taxpayers is substantial, and in fact, they're still giving up the 3 acres. Now, I'm still, again, 100% for the swap. I'd love to see this facility built out there. But I would also like to see, as a part of the deal, some terms and conditions on the deed transfer. Number one, maybe that within 10 years, the village expects a swimming facility of some type to be built in that location. If not, the property reverts to the village. Number two, maybe something to the effect of, if in fact they do not find anyone, they cannot sell or otherwise transfer the property to anyone unless it's a bona fide organization that will continue to run a swimming facility. And maybe another terms and condition would be that if in fact there's a membership fee to this facility, that residents of Pinehurst do not have to pay the fee. So those are some of the types of terms and conditions that make sense. the idea of giving $20,000 in addition to doing the swap, in addition to the money we're going to have to spend to rehab or to demolish this facility, makes absolutely no sense to the voters. So I mean, I think you really got to think through where this deal came from, and in fact, the history of this property. And I'd like to see a swap, but I'd like to see on terms and conditions that make sense to the voters. Your opinion?
My opinion, my turn. I do appreciate that it was a wonderful community swimming pool for a long time. Now, when you gave it to the Sand Sharks in 2014, they did a lot of talking about what they were going to do, but the fact is, Jack, they've done nothing. And the property has deteriorated greatly. Now, when they were planning to do the project at that site, they told us at that time that there would be no public swimming. So when you talk about Pinehurst residents being able to use it for free, Clark, maybe you have a better handle on this, but they told us that because they were a swim club, they couldn't, it would be a different liability.
Have open swim, correct?
Yes,
Yeah, they did say
yes.
that, that's right.
Well, I don't know how we can make them let us.
The only thing we did discuss, and this was at that presentation when the facility was going to be built out and so forth, was that it would possibly be available to the Park and Rec Department, you know, of course, for programs. But that's all beside the point at this point in time. The point is, the facility, you're right, needs to be apparently demolished.
Yes, it does.
And I'm 100% again for the swap, but I think that the deal that we're giving the Sand Sharks is more than generous by providing the 3 acres and taking on the responsibility for demolishing the property that they would, in fact, either have to rehab, apparently that's impossible, or demolish themselves. So from a voter and from a, property owner and from a taxpayer point of view, I'd like to see you strike a good deal, a fair deal, and the fair deal eliminates some of these freebie parts and recognizes how much money the village is going to have to spend to fix up this property.
$20,000 would actually give them a little bit of a start on their facility. They don't have any money.
Well, wait a minute.
They do?
Are we providing a grant to a organization, or are we doing a land swap?
We're doing
I
a
mean,
land
this sounds
swap.
like two separate deals here.
When you look at the numbers, 57.6 versus 60,000, you don't think that's in any
Well,
way comparable?
you know, the value of the property is almost meaningless. First of all, they don't pay any real estate taxes. The land value, or excuse me, the total property at Moore County for that 1 acre is probably like $132,000, as I remember. I have no idea, of course, what the 3 acres would be since it hasn't been created yet. That isn't the point. The point is, we are swapping and giving them a facility where they can, in fact, and we'll have the room to build hopefully, a quality swimming
I hope they
facility.
can. I hope
I
so.
don't see why we have to provide seed money to an organization to do that. If we're going to start giving money to organizations, that's a whole different question. I
Okay,
think.
stop. Other council members' opinions on this?
I don't look at it as seed money, number one. I look at it as, this is how between the land value, to make the deal essentially about even for each, we're getting that acre for $60,000.
Wait a minute, what about the land value of the cost of demolishing the current property? Doesn't that reduce the land value of the property we're getting?
Well, you're talking to someone who doesn't think that the land we're giving has all that much value. We bought.
I didn't assess it, you assessed it.
A pig and a poke, however many years ago. I'm the one and only one who wants to say it publicly. We spent $1 million on a swamp. And we're getting rid of 3 acres. Nobody pays tax. They're not going to pay tax on the corner, the acre that we have now. We're never going to receive tax money as long as we own that property out on.
Jennifer Lake?
Well, but you said that the land value is $60,000 that you're giving away. And yet at the same time, we are going to have to spend how much money to demolish and rehab that property? Who knows, $30,000, $40,000, $50,000. You got to tear out all the infrastructure, the pool, the concrete. It has to be leveled, it has to be filled. I mean, you have to reduce the value of the property that we're getting, but you have to add to that value the money we're going to spend.
Personally, as a resident who drives by that every day, 2 or 3 times a day, I see the benefit
I do
of
too.
getting that to be part of our park and not be what it is.
I'm not arguing that.
Well,
I'm
that has
arguing-
value to me. That
I'm
has
not
value.
arguing whether we should, I'm arguing whether we should in fact give another $20,000 when we're going to have to spend money to make it suitable.
In my mind, that what we're giving, even with spending that money, even if it goes 60,000 and we spend another 20 and we're at 80,000 to get that acre and make it part of our park service and enhance that corner, $80,000 is well spent.
Well, unfortunately,
I agree.
it looks like a giveaway. On the surface, financially, it looks like a giveaway.
I just don't agree with that. I don't see that, I don't see it from that perspective.
Jeff, did you have something that you wanted to add?
Nope, sorry.
What I was going to add was only that the value of Cannon Park per acre by the county tax office is around $59,000, and that's where the $60,000 came from. The property at 3.2 acres, the county property that we swapped, is valued at around $8,500, $9,000, but it is off the road frontage. 10,200, I think, was what was placed on the 3.2 acres based on what the value of the county property was, again, using the county tax office. So all I'm saying is that's where the numbers came from. So the 20,000 was to bring the value of the property at Juniper Lake up to be more comparable with what was at the corner.
Okay, well, just in conclusion, you're asking the taxpayers to do this swap. You're asking them to spend $20,000 plus the rehab cost, and another $5,000, by the way, for survey and legal expenses. That's in the statement.
And that was including it at 57.
So potentially, the taxpayers are being asked to spend somewhere in the neighborhood of, who knows, $50,000, $60,000, it depends on demolition costs, to do this swap.
Thank you very much for your comments.
Well, thank you.
Okay,
Just FYI, don't know what the demolition cost would be on the pool in the corner, but I did check previously during all this discussions with the county, Pinehurst Resort and Country Club, who demolished two pools, one at Bretton Woods, one at St. Andrews. They spent about $14,000 combined for the two. This one may be more. I mean, so it may end up being
Okay,
$15,000.
that's good
but it
information to have, so
shouldn't
it's
be
not-
30 or 40 at least based on comps.
okay, so how do we proceed on this?
There's not a motion or anything. I just need to know, is this the direction you want to go? And if so, we will have your vote on October the 10th, and we will, meantime, begin prepping.
Is this the direction we want to go? It's the direction I want to go.
And assuming it gets consummated and we move forward, do we have assurances that we're going to finally clean up Rattlesnake Trail?
Yes, we're going to actually look at Rattlesnake Trail from Woods Road to 211.
Thank goodness. Took 4 years, but
Every day, I
Wow.
drive by it too.
And part of the reason Mark's held off on doing some stuff along that section there was, some uncertainty of what was going to happen, relative to the pool, what was going to happen relative to a community center. We didn't want to spend money on some stuff and then turn around and tear it back out. So we just kind of
I
were waiting to see.
get all that.
Yeah.
We could have done,
Yes,
we could have done
absolutely.
some of it without
High.
having-
It would be a definite priority to get a plan for that section.
So my question is, anyone opposed to moving forward with the legal documents that Jeff has to prepare in order for us to seal this deal at the next meeting? Anyone opposed?
No.
Okay, then I think you have consensus. Thank you, Jeff. Number 15.
Okay, and Natalie's going to come back up again, and this is another one of the outgrowths of our efforts at continuous improvement. But what Natalie has been taking, and Lauren have been taking a very hard look over the last several months at some of our supply chain, I won't call them challenges, just ways that we can get better. And as a result of what we learned from looking at that, we're going to ask you to consider some updates to our purchasing policy.
Yes, so if we could, I'd like to spend the next 30 minutes talking about our purchasing policy. I
Only
couldn't
this-
say it without laughing.
Kidding,
Like
she
to
was
see me
kidding.
leaving? Time limit.
I'm hungry.
No, as Jeff mentioned, this is one of the recommendations from our site visit a couple of years ago for the Awards for Excellence. And Lauren and myself and John Fry went through and evaluated our purchasing policy and how we select suppliers to provide goods and services to village residents. And we have a couple of suggested changes in the policy that's attached to the agenda item, which are highlighted in red and underlined for you. Ultimately, it's really just about improving not only how we select our suppliers, but how we also evaluate their performance. So did that paving contractor do a good job, and should we hire them again next year? That's essentially the bottom line of the changes that we have in here for you today. It also has, and there's a couple of things in there. We are asking our employees to assign letter grades to certain suppliers, to say, yes, I would recommend, or no, not recommend using this supplier again in the future. And then making sure that our key suppliers that we've identified as like the village attorney, architects, engineers, solid waste vendors, those kinds of folks, that we're making sure that they're representing the village in the way that we want to be represented, so that they're aware of what our mission and vision values are. They're signing ethics statements that they agree to behave in an ethical manner. It's really a lot of just cleanup in the contract language.
At the red, it looks like contract relations. Sounds good. Okay, any questions for Natalie?
It would just take a resolution for you to make the change. This is a financial policy, which does require council approval, which is why we brought it to you today.
That's item 15.
I move to approve Resolution 17-27, amending the purchasing policy for the Village of Pinehurst.
Second.
We have a motion by John Baldry, a second by John Cashin. Is there any discussion? If not, let's vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Thank you, Natalie.
You're welcome.
And
Thank
that's
you.
unanimous. Okay. Next, we have other business. Any council member have other business? Other business to discuss? The next item then is comments from attendees. Anyone like to make comments this evening? Yes, ma'am. Please come up and just give us your name and... It won't record unless you're talking into a microphone.
Not to worry. Now I'm talking.
Yes, you
My
are.
name is Deb Wimberly. Thank you so much for taking the time, and I promise you I will be brief.
Okay.
Back in about middle of July, 14th of July, I sent you folks a letter asking you to get a hold of Jamie Bowles to start the process for a recall provision in our town code. I signed the letter, but it was accompanied by 120 signatures of other residents of the village, and I have a letter back from the mayor saying, no, that we are not going to do that.
Exactly.
I'm getting kickback from these 120 people. They'd like to know how it is you voted. I tried to find that out. I couldn't, so I'm
No,
here so you to
we
tell me.
asked our attorney to respond to that. I don't know that it ever came to the whole council. Did you ever?
I honestly don't remember.
We asked our village attorney. I actually started a letter, but our village attorney actually completed the letter and told you in great detail that this is not any kind of omission in our charter. In fact, it's very rare that there is a recall provision. I think somewhere around 5% of the municipalities and counties have the recall provision. So we do not see any need, our attorney does not see any need to change our charter and have a recall position.
I appreciate that very much, but I listened to Mr. Baldry talking about being responsive to the residents and hearing what they have to say. I know they particularly would like to know what Ms. Bergen has to say, as she is an incumbent and people are going to be voting.
Okay.
So if you'd be so kind as to let me know how you feel about that?
Well, I think our attorney addressed the issue,
Okay,
and I stand by his word.
okay, all right. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Wimberly. Any other comments from attendees? Mr. Strickland.
Wasn't expecting to speak tonight, but I'm reflecting now on the start of the meeting. and where we ended up just 60 seconds ago. Start of the meeting tonight had to do with community surveys and business surveys. And if I saw it correctly, one of the areas that came out as a area the Village Council no doubt wants to work on is responsiveness and interaction to village residents.
Right.
Now, a woman has just appeared here who had a petition evidently to request a recall provision. It was sent evidently to all of you on the council. Nobody responded to that. I heard the issue of,
Yes,
of
it
the
has been
attorney.
responded to. It was responded to
But
Ms.
it would seem to
Wimberly.
me that some explanation on the part of the different council members here, since you all evidently received the letter from what I just heard.
Does
And
anyone
that-
want
that-
to add, excuse me, does anyone want to add to what our village attorney said about the recall provision? If not, I mean, if
So-
you do, that's fine. If not, you can have a copy of that letter.
Happy to see the letter, but
Right.
I think the
I
issue
think
is
Ms.
that the
Wimberly
village
can give
council
you a
is the
copy.
governing body of the village, and whether it's this matter or others, there would be issues that would be expected to be responded to by council members individually at an open meeting, since evidently no decision was ever made in response to the letter. It was a comment from the village council, village general counsel, village attorney, not any of the council members. And I think what the public was expecting from what I've just heard was, where did the village council come out on this issue, which was evidently never voted on, although the letter evidently says it was decided. So how did the village council decide it if you never voted and never discussed it in open session? It's as simple as that.
I think the answer, John, is that we referred it to our attorney, and the letter asked us to ask Jamie Bowles to introduce some legislation. Actually, Ms. Wimberly asked Jamie Bowles to introduce legislation, and our Representative Bowles said, I don't do that unless the village council asks me to do that.
Right.
Well, you got to be at a microphone. Okay, Jamie prefers that it come from the village. So faced with, are we going to vote for a recall provision? We referred it to our attorney, and he researched the letter with what the letter said in it. And part of the letter, I don't exactly remember, but it was obviously an omission in our charter. And that was not the case. And he explained that it was not an omission in our charter, and we are treating this the same way 95% of municipalities in North Carolina treat it. So what is the point of some more discussion on an issue like that?
Evidently, it's not an omission in the charter. It's for the village council across the breadth of the state of North Carolina to decide what it wants to put in its charters. Southern Pines and Aberdeen, I believe, have this
Yes, they
provision.
do, and they've probably been
So
there for a long
the-
time.
the question-
Ms. Wimberly, you're not at a microphone. Nobody will even hear what you say. So you can wait your turn if you want to talk again.
So what I was hearing was, the question was, why doesn't the village council vote on this or discussion in open session as to the merits or not of this issue? And I think that's what the people evidently who signed the petition were looking for. It's the village council decision, not the village attorney's decision.
That's just not the way that I understood it.
Well,
And I referred it to our
from what I
attorney.
just heard, all the council members got the letter. So was there never any, there never been any discussion at any meeting I've attended?
Never been any public discussion that I'm aware of. I referred it to our attorney, and our attorney responded to, along with some of my remarks, responded to Ms. Wimberly, and that's where the issue stands right now.
So you're taking the advice of the village attorney rather than discussing the issue, which has been brought to you by petition of over 100 citizens. And it's evidently the position of the village council and each of you that you are against placing a recall provision
It is definitely my
up to
position.
up to vote of the citizens to have the citizens decide if they want to put that in their charter. So you're
It is
saying
my
that-
position that we do not want to change our charter. Does anyone want to change our charter and add a recall provision?
Well, you wouldn't vote on
No,
changing, you wouldn't vote on changing it today.
No.
You don't ask that question. There's a lot to the discussion of recall and why some have decided to in the past or will in the future, and the merits, the pros and the cons. I mean, if it's a discussion the public wants to have, then let's have it. I mean, if we're going to do recall, let's do term limits too. I mean, I'm sincere when I say that. I think it's a fair conversation. And Mr. Strickland raises a fair point that if you're going to have the discussion, have the discussion. I mean, most jurisdictions don't have it because when you have the full discussion, if you've read the pros and the cons, the reason they don't are justified. But if you want to have the discussion, let's have the discussion in the public. I mean, there shouldn't be any reason to shy away from it. If this happens during this council's seating, great. If it happens for the next council, have the discussion. Let the public come and have the conversation.
I'm going to suggest that we talk, since it is 8:45, that we talk a little more about this at our work session next month.
There's nothing to hide from a
Not at
recall
all.
conversation.
Not at all.
Some of the conversation is based on emotion. We know that. I mean, we saw what happened. The best example we're going to have is the school board when they fired Dr. Grimacy, and then he was brought back, and the public reacted. Well, the hammer over everything was going to be a recall provision. Well, that didn't happen, and I know the reasons they didn't do it. And that's part of the public conversation and dialogue in that regard. And there's reasons most don't. But in theory, it's a good idea. If you think about it just briefly, in theory, it's a good idea for all jurisdictions. Because then, we saw what happened in the state of Wisconsin with the governor. It gives people the outlet under, circumstances to speak and maybe change their minds on who they voted for. In theory, and then when you think about the whole conversation in total, all the pros and cons, more often than not, people decide, against it from a jurisdictional standpoint. But if we want to have the conversation, let's have the conversation. There's no reason not to have. I mean, it's.
Okay, we will be addressing this at our work session, our next work session. Maybe we'll have a little bit of input from our attorney and a little historical information.
As far as the attorney comment, number one, we've heard my comments before at other meetings. If you've come to the meetings or you've heard me say it, our attorney has an opinion, and that's what he has. And sometimes the opinion is black and white, and it's pretty straightforward. You can't do certain things. Mr. Strickland was on council. Some of us here were on council when we've had one of those circumstances where you get the advice and you're like, okay, let's move forward. We don't necessarily like the pill. That's not a pill we like to swallow all the time. But there's certain circumstances that lend themselves to, okay, you have to go that route. If I'd have to go back and read the letter again from Mrs. Wimberly, and I'd have to remember the emails. And I could be wrong. I think it was about the omission from the charter comment that was more geared towards the legal opinion. And I could be wrong. But a legal opinion in this regard, in my opinion, is not a you can't or shouldn't or whatever with regard to taking a position on the recall. I think I think the legal opinion was whether or not our charter was we had an omission. We don't have an omission. Our charter is the same as everybody else's charter. I mean, they're pretty much all the same. You can enhance them and change them. We've changed ours. I mean, the mayor can vote. Originally, the mayor couldn't vote. We've changed our charter over time. So if we want to have the conversation, let's have the conversation. I mean, if that's what the people want to hear, it doesn't mean you're going to vote that way. I mean, this council won't be the one that votes on it anyway, but if I was to run and get reelected, I'd gladly have the conversation. And if it bit me in the behind, it would bite me in the behind. I mean, it's the same with the videotaping.
I think that the question evidently from the letter had nothing to do with it being omitted.
There was a comment in there about that.
But why would the council oppose going forward to put it in to the charter? I think that's the discussion that was asked for, and perhaps we'll do that on October 10, your next meeting.
We will be talking about it on our next work session.
I might suggest in closing, and thank you for your time, that if you're going to do it at the work session, which would be fine, it would be helpful to provide at least some provision for public comment on that particular point. Thank you very much.
Or strategically, I mean, procedurally, it might be a better way of saying it. If you did it then and we have our conversation and then you put it on an agenda at another time, I mean, that's to me fair game. I don't think it's going to get decided at one meeting. I really do think as people, you hear all the pros and cons, I think you're going to hear, people may change their mind. I don't know, one way or the other.
Well, evidently there's at least 125 people looking for feedback and discussion from the village council, it seems to be appropriate in this case. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments from attendees? Okay, seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
So,
All in favor?
second, moved.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.